Okay, good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Want to acknowledge that this evening, Greg Baber and Trina Loomis had prior engagements, but the other 7 of us will gladly take care of everything on the agenda. The first order of business for tonight is to consider the approval of the April 23rd, 2024 regular meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the April 23rd, 2024 Planning Board meeting.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion on the minutes? None? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that carries unanimously. Okay, public comments. So public comments, when you're going to speak, you get 3 minutes for your public comments, and we'll look for name and address, and then once you do that, then we'll start your timer. You can follow along on the blue digital clock there. That'll be your timer. And let's see.
Chairman, I think we should approve the agenda before going into the public comments.
You want to do that? Okay. Okay, so as far as the agenda, did you have it change? Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we move item 4C to the second item. So 4A, 4C, and then 4B.
Okay, so putting the SUP in front of the rezone.
Correct, simply putting the special use permit hearing in front of the rezoning, which is a more logical order of the way we should
Correct.
discuss it.
Okay. Second. All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion on that agenda change? None? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Okay. All right, so we have altered the agenda. Now we can move forward with public comments. And the first one signed up to speak this evening, Dan Boone. Mr. Boone, you know the drill?
I do.
All right.
Dan Boone, 317 Southland Road in Huntersville. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Planning board members, it's always good to see you, and staff. Thank you for the job you do for the town. I'm here tonight to talk about one member who this is his last meeting, is Frank Gammon. Frank has always come prepared to his meeting. He's well-informed, and he does do his homework. So Frank, I'd like to say thank you for your service to not only our country, but to the town of Huntersville. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Boone. Next up to speak, Wasim Alabed. Sir, you have 3 minutes, and that'll start once you provide name and address.
All right. My name is Wasim Alabed. I'm at 8815 Forest Shadow Circle in Cornelius. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, thank you for taking the time and the opportunity to let me speak today. As a member of the Stratford Forest community, you see a bunch of us over here with the little stickers. I'm here to express our strong opposition to the proposed North Point Hotel development. I believe it's 4C and 4B on your agenda. The development that's adjoining our neighborhood. Our primary concerns revolve around 3 issues. Number 1, safety of our children. Number 2, the increased traffic congestion. And number 3, the proximity of the development to our homes. First and foremost, Stratford Forest is a family-oriented community with many children. The hotel construction and operation will bring an influx of strangers, raising safety concerns, and for instance, school bus pickup at a nearby apartment complex is directly across the street from the hotel entrance, increasing potential risks. Secondly, traffic congestion. I don't have to tell you that Sanford is congested already, or that whole area is. The traffic congestion is already significant during peak hours. A new hotel would worsen this, leading to more congestion and potential accidents, negatively impacting our daily commutes and quality of life. Additionally, there are already 6 hotels within 1 mile radius. Actually, it's a little less than 1 mile, with an average occupancy rate of less than 60%. This indicates there's no significant demand for more hotel accommodations, making this development unnecessary. Thirdly, the proximity of the proposed hotel to our homes is candidly alarming. The noise, light pollution, and constant activity would disrupt our peaceful environment and threaten our harmony of our community. Moreover, the estimated annual tax revenue for this development for the town of Huntersville is somewhere between $10,000 and $14,000. So we're not talking about a lot of money here, folks. This modest amount doesn't justify the significant negative impact to our community. I urge you to consider the long-term impacts for Stratford Forest and the folks that live on North Cross. Following me, many of my neighbors will provide further details on the safety, the traffic, and the proximity to our neighborhood. Please listen to our concern and reconsider the approval for this hotel development. Thank you for your time and attention.
All right, thank you. Folks, just as a reminder that I've given, and not to say that many of you in the room have been and done this before, whatever, but other times when we've had a full house like this, or even if it's just a few, when someone gives their public comments, it's not a performance, so we're not applauding or reacting negatively or any sort of reaction to it. Okay, it's not that type of thing. That's not this venue. So we're going to have people come up, give their public comments. They're going to go down. Next person on the list, we're going to come up. So it's not something where it's interactive. Okay, Morgan Cooley, you are up next. Ms. Cooley, you have 3 minutes when you're ready. Name and address, thank you.
My name is Morgan Cooley, A2174 Shadow Circle. I'm here to discuss the hotel as well. We are fairly new to this neighborhood as we've moved here from California. Having a parking lot and business outside our previous home is one thing that we unfortunately know too well. It began with just loitering and noise, but then it turned into trespassing on our property. One night, there was people hanging and drinking outside in their car. They threw a 3-pound weight through our window, landing in the playroom of my son. If he had been there, I don't know what could have happened to him. This parking lot was at a business that closed at 10. This will be a 24-hour hotel, though, a constant opportunity for our neighborhood to be subject to this. Hotels, including Marriott, can attract criminal activity. The privacy they provide create opportunities for exploitation and endanger the safety of our community. Marriott was just part of a lawsuit with 12 other hotels for its involvement with child sex trafficking in the last year alone. Just months ago, it was announced a U.S. Air Force man was suing Marriott after he was sexually assaulted and robbed at the Charlotte Marriott City Center. The hotel admitted they knew the attacker, and it wasn't the first time this happened. And last week, a man was shot and killed at a hotel in Charlotte. The Marriott they want to build will overlook my backyard. You can see into my window. The people staying there can watch my children play. They can watch our routine, take pictures, and walk across the parking lot into our neighborhood and snatch my kids. This hotel offers that opportunity. The owners tell us that this hotel will be mostly business people staying there. They have no way of knowing that. I personally have a close relative who's a long-term guest as a Marriott in another state, and they are unfortunately an unemployed drug addict and dealer. Their parents are paying for the hotel, so as far as the hotel is concerned, the resident's an upstanding business owner. There's no way to monitor these guests or know who's going to be staying there. The hotel will also have direct access to Birkdale Village. We've seen a major uptick in crime in Birkdale Village in this last year. 3 reports involving guns in the last month alone. That now has the possibility of making its way to our neighborhood. Just to emphasize how close we are, we can hear the entire lineup of Live Under the Oaks every Friday from our backyards. Sorry, I lost my... And my son has woken up scared to the banging of the trucks unloading behind the movie theater early in the morning. So if we're hearing that from Burkdale, imagine the nuisance of this hotel. After that constant noise of construction while it's built, then follow with 24 hours of constant business, there will be no break, no rest, and our homes, where we are supposed to escape from the world, that will be taken from us. We have no problem with the business being built. We know the cities grow and change. It's inevitable. But I urge you to think if this was happening to your home and family. I ask you please to not vote in favor for this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Cooley. All right, next up. Is it Luis or Lewis? Borges. Lewis. All right, thanks, sir.
Hey, hello, good evening. My name is Luis Borges. I live at 17007 Shady Glen Drive. That's right on the border with Huntersville. Like she was saying, we're very close to Birkdale. So we are technically somewhat, frankly, the policies of Huntersville affect us more than the policies of Cornelius because we are landlocked from Huntersville. And that's why I hope that you guys can understand our case and help us. So I want to thank you for listening to our concerns. One of the concerns is that the tree buffer that they're saying, many of the trees are going to be deciduous trees. So in the winter, anybody's going to be able to see into our houses. And like she's saying, some of the houses, depending on what you are, you will be able to see the hotel year round. Like from my house right now, where there are trees now, I can still see parts of the business park on it that is in there now. So what they're saying that you won't be able to see the hotel is not possible because I can see them now. And so I don't see how they're claiming that. Also, the hotel is very, very close to our houses, like ridiculously close. Like it's about 85 feet, so 28 yards, okay, to the closest house, and about 35 feet, 12 yards from the parking lot. That's it, from the bottom of the parking lot to the property line of that closer neighbors. This is like absurdly close distances that are nowhere seen anywhere outside of, like, you have to be on downtown Charlotte to see a hotel next to your house. It's not for suburban development, how close it is to a community. I am all in favor of progress, but not at my expense and our property's values, which I think they're gonna take a hit, because once they start building that from the construction, and who's gonna wanna live next to a hotel, especially if you have children, which many of our neighbors have children. I have 4 children. On the other side over here, I think they have 2 kids. There's a lady over here, because I live in the cul-de-sac that's very close to where they're gonna build the hotel. She has children, like young children, then 2 houses down there, I have another one with 2 children, and then another 2 more houses, I think there's another one. Like, we are loaded with children, because it's the perfect, the house is at the right size, and it's like very, very calm neighborhood. It's one of the safest in Cornelius now, I believe. We're one of the safest neighborhoods, but who's going to monitor who's able to stay inside a hotel? No one, right? So you're going to have, at some point, I would assume, sexual predators. It's likely. I mean, it's not impossible for sure, because nobody knows who's going to get into the hotel. You're going to have any kind of scumbags, frankly. And if you have laws about, like, you can only be 250 feet from a school, but you can be less than 250 feet from a house that have children on it, to me, that's like, doesn't make any sense. Like, why are zoning laws if not to prevent this monstrosity from happening? So I hope that you can help us to keep our neighborhood safe and not just look from the money perspective, but our safety. Because if something does happen to any of our children, I mean, you're going to have some skin on the game. Anyways, thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay, next up, I believe this says Tommy. Tommy Mann? Mr. Mann, you have 3 minutes. Name and address, please.
My name is Tommy Mann. I live at 17006 Shady Glen in Cornelius. Thank you for hearing our concerns. I am here to talk mainly about the noise that's going to be coming from the hotel, the traffic and patrons that will be 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Not only the direct noise is an issue, but the echoes as well. Everyone's familiar with echoes, but I want to be a little bit more scientific. Echo is a reflected sound wave that reaches the ears and bouncing off of a surface. It's essentially a delayed, repetitious sound that occurs when sound waves enter a reflective surface, such as a 3-story hotel, and are then redirected back towards the listener. The time it takes for the reflected sound to return to the listener's ear depends on the distance of the source of the sound and the reflective surface. For example, a hard, smooth surface such as concrete and bricks produces the strongest echoes. The speed of sound in air at 68 degrees is 1,125 feet per second. With the parking lot only being 60 feet from our property line, the noise will be instantaneous. The distance of the hotel being between 240 and 300 feet from our neighborhood, the echoes will occur in approximately a quarter of a second. So as you can see, the design and the location of the proposed hotel is flawed due to the angle and shape of the hotel, with the parking lot being in between the neighborhood, and will trap and force the noise back into our neighborhood. The proposed fence and trees will do little to stop the sound waves bouncing off 3-story walls. As Huntersville's 2040 plan says, I quote, "to establish a framework, growth, and development while maintaining character and livability of the residents." This does not maintain the livability, nor does it support a diverse commercial development plan, as there are already 6 hotels within a mile of the business park, with another one already being built. Not only is the noise a problem, but assuming the hotel will match the other buildings in the business park, the parking lot lights will reflect off the white walls of the hotel, causing an added nuisance. I strongly disapprove of the building of this hotel so close to our neighborhood, and please ask the planning board to reject this proposal. With your permission, I would like to demonstrate how close the parking lot will be to our home.
Mr. Mann, thank you. All right, the last person to sign up to speak this evening, Julie Beth, is it Jarvis? All right.
Before I begin, I would like to enter the pictures and the petition he has signed into the record. And also, I sent these to each of you. Would you all like to?
We had, if you would do me a favor, go up there, introduce yourself, address, before you start, then you can hand them to my colleague over there. We can pass them down, but that is the email that we did receive.
Okay, thank you. My name is Julie Beth Jarvis, 17006 Shady Glen Drive, Cornelius, North Carolina. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our concerns. Can everyone from Stratford Forest please stand up? As you can see, we show up. There's a lot of folks on vacation, or we would have more. And our neighborhood is filled with wonderful people, children of all ages. Our neighborhood is peaceful, safe, and truly a great place to live. My husband and I are the house that is adjacent to the property, as you'll see in those pictures. I purchased and have lived in this house since August of 2001. That is 23 years. When I purchased the house, the business park wasn't there, but I was informed it was going to be built, and I was aware that there would be office buildings right beside my property. It was zoned for a business, and they're asking you to rezone it, where a business is 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. This is 24/7 and does the majority of its business after 5 and weekends. The lawyer for the hotel developers tries to tell you that this business is off-peak. It's off-peak to typical business hours. I live my home in the evenings and on weekends, and I'm sure you all do as well. So this is when the hotels are busy. Therefore, the entire time I'm home, I will be subject to all the people coming and going and all the noise and total strangers You know, if I wanted to do that, I'd live uptown. And how many of you would want to live beside something like that? Would you want your family living beside transit people coming and going all hours? The hotel will not increase revenue for the town of Huntersville the way a business office park does, not in the office building. The occupancy tax at 3%, divided between towns, divided between Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce, you're talking less than like 15 cents for a $100 room. Same with the sales tax. So you will make more money, more property tax from something like that. The other thing, you will also have more jobs from an office park, in the office park with the office building, more jobs that pay more and bring more into this community because they'll have more income to spend than the few jobs that will be brought by a hotel. And just remember, the hotels you see that are running down now that you're like, oh, you know, they were once shiny and new. And the hotel will begin to run down in 10 years, and their franchise is up in 10 years. So they'll sell and move on because they're not from our area. The 2040 plan says establish growth and development while making the character and livability of the town. There's, okay, sorry, but please give us a chance. I thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, folks, thank you for that. Now, we will jump into the actual agenda. Let's see, we've already taken care of the agenda change. First item on the agenda, we'll look to consider a recommendation on petition TA 24-04. That's a request by the Huntersville Planning Department to amend Article 11, Section 11.4.3A of the Huntersville zoning ordinance, and also Article 5 of the Huntersville subdivision ordinance in response to the Huntersville Ordinance Advisory Board bylaw updates.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to put my staff report in the record for TA 2404 as a HOAB bylaw update. The Huntersville ordinance, or the Huntersville Town Board on March 4th, 2024, voted to approve amendments to the Huntersville Ordinance Advisory Board bylaws. Staff is now updating the language in the Huntersville zoning and subdivision ordinance to match the updated bylaws. So first, we have the changes in the zoning ordinance. This is in Article 11.4.3A, and this outlines the text amendment process. We here have Huntersville Ordinance Advisory Board struck from that. And then here we have Article 5 of the subdivision ordinance. Similarly, we have Huntersville Ordinance Advisory Board struck from there as well. So on to recommendation, staff recommends approval of TA 2404 to stay compliant with the recently updated bylaws. And on March 4th, March 7th, 2024, excuse me, the Huntersville Ordinance Advisory Board recommended denial of TA 2404 with a vote of 5 disapproval, 1 abstaining, to remove the references from Article 11 of the zoning ordinance and Article 5 of the subdivision ordinance. Here to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for staff on this?
Just to clarify, you're saying that it doesn't have to go to HOB, it can come directly to us, just plain language, you're saying you're removing Ordinance Advisory Board from the process?
That specific section of the zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance was about text amendment initiation. So now it removed them from that process. So
Right, removing them from the text amendment process. Whereas
they can
before,
no longer initiate text amendments.
oh, okay, they can initiate.
So they will still hear text amendments, but they won't.
They will hear, okay, all right.
All right, any other questions for staff? No? Okay, I'll accept the motion.
Have it.
I'd like to make a motion in considering the proposed amendment TA 2404, Planning Board recommends approval based on consistency with all the policies of the Huntersville 2040 Community Plan and compliance with the state statutes. It is reasonable and in the public interest to amend the zoning ordinance because it will provide further clarification to the language.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second. Mr. Hensley?
I'll make a comment. I sat on the HOAB board as well, and my comment then was that I was not in support of changing the bylaws, but the fact that the bylaws have now been changed, this is simply cleaning up the ordinance to come in line with the bylaws. So for that reason, I support it.
I've sat on this board for 6 years, and out of those 6 years, 4.5, I think, maybe 4.5, over 4 years, I sat on the Ordinance Advisory Board, and before that, I backseated the Ordinance Advisory Board because I found that I learned a lot and I saw what was coming this way to the Planning Board, so I was more prepared. When I first began to go to these meetings, the Ordinance Advisory Board was a board where it wasn't just zoning and subdivision ordinances were brought, regular ordinances. I remember sitting in the back and listening to one of the ranking officers and the PD there discussing with the members of the Ordinance Advisory Board about the problems they were having at Burkdale with middle schoolers, and how should they change the ordinances in order to try to help mitigate that. Those were the type of things that came to the Ordinance Advisory Board. It was very, very useful. And that's just one example of many things. Over time, the rules of procedure for that board have changed, and slowly responsibilities were taken from them till now what they're restricted to reviewing text amendments to the zoning ordinances is what it basically amounts to. But I also will add over that time, and maybe even now, the planning department sometimes would come to the Ordinance Advisory Board and use it as a sounding board on future text amendments they may or may not, and get their input on how they should approach those text amendments. This is just one more nail as we go, that now another responsibility has been taken from the Ordinance Advisory Board. But that's the town board has that authority, and they're the elected officials, and they get to make those decisions.
I plan to vote to approve this as a formality, but not without using this opportunity to highlight some errors in judgment that led us here. First was taking away the HOB's ability to propose text amendments is wrong. Both our former planning director and former mayor have said that we should continue to try to identify and correct any ambiguity or vagueness in our zoning ordinance. Those places where the spirit of the ordinance is insufficient in avoiding undesirable interpretations. Also, the HOAB is comprised of very talented, caring, and knowledgeable people, some with School of Government experience, others with broad public office experience. It's free advice, why refuse it? Also, the manner in which this action was taken is wrong. There was no notice or discussion with the HOAB or chair. Staff was allowed to insinuate that an HOAB member or members had acted inappropriately in some unspecified manner. Whether this was hypothetical or not, it is wrong to disparage this advisory board as a means to support this action. It has drawn out our local chapter of the conspiracy theorist. The town board has been asked to step up and formally correct this error. Hopefully, we will hear that apology when this goes to them next. Thank you.
Just like everybody else, I plan to support the amendment. But I will say that I was asked to be on the Ordinance Advisory Board when it first started and served on it for 2 terms. The instructions then were to be somewhat more proactive, to look for, opportunities for everybody to work together. And it was sort of like the first step to see, as Frank said, a sounding board. It looks like it evolved into something that's a lot more reactive now, where it's kind of duplicating the things that we do here in a weird way. I feel like it did lose its purpose. I will support it, but like everybody else, it was sort of a shame to see the change that happened previously. That's all.
All right, any other discussion on that? I'll say for myself as a founding member of that board as well, about 3.5 years on that board and went to vice chair with that before I came over to serve on the planning board. I'll just say that I don't agree with the actions that have already been taken, but I have made that very clear both publicly in the appropriate manner and privately as well. So when it comes to this position, I just follow what Scott said, and actually what you said at that meeting. That was Scott's first meeting taking over as the planning board liaison for the HOAB, and he got to walk into that, which was awesome. But he basically took the high road and said that the decision and the actions have already been taken. Train has left the station, I believe, and so from here, it is just cleaning up the ordinance to honor and acknowledge and align with what's already been decided. So that's that. All right.
And I would like to add one other thing just to point out. I was a member of that board because I sat on the planning board. One member of the Ordinance Advisory Board is a planning board member. I was not appointed by the town board because you can't be on two boards at the same time, but planning board, we can. I was that member. Scott Hensley replaced me when I left it in January. But the other thing you see, two members up here, Jay Henson and Jeff, are both former members. And the person who's replacing me is coming from the Ordinance Advisory Board. That's where they were. It was a training ground for people to learn the ordinances so that you put better quality people on the planning board also. And I just want to point that out. That will be lost.
Okay, with that, if there is no more discussion, all those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion.
Abstain.
You did? I thought I saw your hand, I'm sorry.
I abstain.
All right. That motion carries 6-0 with one abstention. Is that the proper word? Abstention? Look at that.
Good job.
Man,
That's why you're the chair.
my parents will be so proud they paid for college just for that. All right, folks, it's time to discuss the hotel.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
before we move on to the next item, I'd like to disclose that our firm worked on this project, and it would be a conflict of interest for me to make any recommendations to the board.
I'm making a motion to recuse Jay Henson from the 2401 hearing,
I'll second that.
SUP 2401 hearing.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion, folks? All right, all those in favor of Mr. Henson being recused? Any opposed? None. That carries unanimously. Okay. 4B. We're going to consider a recommendation on petition SUP 24-01. It's a request by Hotel Ventures of Lake Norman Incorporated for a special use permit for approximately 10.3 acres located at 8830 North Point Executive Park Drive for a 3-story hotel development. Mr. James.
Thank you, sir. So yes, SUP 2401 North Point Hotel. I'd like to enter my staff report into record, and I'd like to also thank Mr. Gammons for his 6 years of service on the planning board. We really appreciate his thoroughness. Clicker's not working, sir. So first off, the most important thing to hear about the process is how a special use permit decision happens and the difference between the planning board and the town board. First, the decision and recommendation for the decision are based on the facts presented. The burden of producing competent material and substantial evidence and proving the ordinance requirements are being satisfied is on the applicant. If the applicant meets that burden, then the burden of producing competent material and substantial evidence shifts to parties arguing against the special use permit. The planning board is not conducting a quasi-judicial hearing tonight. Therefore, anyone who wants to speak, and they already have, may speak during the public comments period. So, moving over, and again, this case does require the SUP and the rezoning. They're reliant on each other. In the Huntersville zoning ordinance, hotels are allowed with conditions in the highway commercial district. Granted, the conditions do speak on the requirement of a special use permit in certain situations. In this situation, there is a single-family residential neighborhood directly adjacent to the proposed hotel. So in 9.4.51, it speaks to that requirement for an SUP. And then B, underneath that, just reiterates that same point that a special use permit is required if one is not met. So just briefly going over where we're at here. This was talked about in the public hearing about the context, but you've got the single-family residential neighborhood to the north, to the east against 77 is multifamily use. The North Point Executive Park Office Park is there adjacent to the proposal, and then Birkdale Village there to the west. So this slide just shows the growth pattern of North Cross Drive. In 1997, as you see in the picture to the left, that is Stratford Forest, and that was there in 97, according to the ortho maps. In 2002, excuse me, in 2002, North Point Executive Park, Office Park, started construction. It was probably a little more like 2001. You can see the two buildings there. So speaking on the separation here of the hotel, the ordinance does require in one of the conditions minimum separation, and the important part of that is the separation in that particular provision of the ordinance speaks on the height of the hotel and then the minimum separation. The applicants did propose a 36-foot in height building, which is measured at the grade to the roof line, not the top of the parapet, but the roof line. So that height times 3 is 108 feet. They are proposing a separation of 200 feet, and that does talk about the separation of the building itself. So on the screen, you will see the updated revisions to the elevation plans based on staff comments, community comments, and comments from the public hearing. The previous elevations did have 100% EIFS. They're showing basically about 90% brick, various color schemes, and some accent EIFS there at the bottom floor. So part of a special use permit hearing is the applicant burden evidence. So we do require an applicant burden evidence application, and it goes to these 5 criteria. And in order for that to pass, the 5 criteria must, the evidence must show that the applicants meet those. The first one is the proposed special use will not materially endanger the public health or safety. 2 is the proposed special use will not substantially injure the value of abutting properties or it constitutes a public necessity. 3, the proposed special use will be in harmony with the area in which it is located and in general conformity with the comprehensive plan and any applicable small area plan. 4, the proposed special use will comply with all lot, size, yard, and other standards that this ordinance applies to all uses permitted in the zoning district in which the property is located. And 5, the proposed special use will comply with all general and specific standards required by the appropriate section of the ordinance for the issuance of a special use permit. So part of the application is the staff must come up with their findings based on the evidence. So the number 1 about public safety, there is no reason to believe that this project would endanger public health or safety. All applicable fire and building safety codes will be met if approved. Worth noting, police chief was not able to attend tonight, but in the public hearing, there was a question asked about crime rates with hotels in Huntersville, in which he did answer that there is no significant change from that use to other commercial uses in town. So number 2, the applicant anticipates presenting evidence from a qualified appraiser that the proposal will not substantially injure the value of abutting properties. Number 3, and then staff findings on that is the proposed special use will be in harmony with the area it is located and in general conformity with the comprehensive plan and any applicable small area plan. Staff findings for number 3, the proposal is consistent with Huntersville 2040 Community Plans, LU1, LU6, 6.1, 6.2. Hotels are a common use within business parks and can be complementary to the business park. Ultimately, as the town board will determine if the separation of the proposed hotel to the single-family residential neighborhood to the north is appropriate, given the information provided by the applicant. Number 4, so the proposal does comply with all applicable standards of the ordinance, minus 1 modification request for the alternative buffer due to the Duke Energy right-of-way, that 100-foot right-of-way. They have asked for 1 modification to that. And then 5, the special use will comply with all general and specific standards required by the appropriate section of this ordinance for the issuance of the special use permit. All standards will be met, and the proposed plan meets these standards. If they did not, we would have more modification requests. So to close, the staff recommendation, staff finds the special use permit application meets the requirements for the proposed hotel use based on findings of fact. Staff recommends approval if the board finds the applicant has presented competent material and substantial evidence that proves the criteria for a special use permit is met. I am here for questions. The applicants do have a presentation they would like to present, so just let me know if you have questions now or after that presentation.
Thank you, Mr. James. If we could, let's go ahead and have questions for staff first. If you guys have questions for the applicant, hold those. We'll let them do their presentation, and then we can ask the questions of them.
Jesse, I do have a question for you, but first I would like legal to come up. I have a question for legal.
Okay.
A clarification, really. Once this leaves here, it's fact that the town commissioners are not supposed to be watching this broadcast, are they?
The only evidence they can consider is the evidence presented at the hearing.
At the hearing.
At the meeting. So yes, they should not be considering any evidence tonight.
Right. Can they consider the rezoning material or just deny the SUP material?
Well, when the hearing goes in front of them, the SUP will happen before the rezoning. To your point, they are somewhat connected, so it would be best practice not to have any ex parte and not consider that.
All right. And I'll just make a comment, and you correct me if I'm wrong. To some of the speakers here tonight, is that you heard that we can hear you. The town board is not going to be able to necessarily hear you. You have to have standing. And I'll let legal define that for you if you're not sure what that is. And they will not, over the 6 years I've watched quasi-judicials, citizens get up and they can talk about your property values and talk about safety, but the town board cannot consider your opinion on those items. They have to hear from someone who's an expert in those fields. So consider that as you move forward. Did I say anything?
That is all generally
All right.
true, yes.
Thank you. And I have a question for Jesse. Because this is something that always confuses me when we do this. The only reason we're doing an SUP for this hotel is because it abuts a residential property.
Correct.
This hotel could be 2,000 meters, a half a mile away, but if it was on the same piece of property and it still abutted the residential area, they would have to have an SUP in order to do this. The 250 feet, 200 feet means nothing in that case.
In this case, and in the case you presented, yes.
Right. Now, where the distance, what I see where they do not require an SUP is, as long as they can't be within 100 feet or 100 meters, I forget,
It's the height of the building times 3, so.
times 3. So 108,
8 feet.
and they're 200 away, so that doesn't require an SUP. So it's the fact that they abut a residential area. I just want to make sure, I was confused, I want to make sure no one else that sits up here with me is confused about why we're doing this SUP.
Crystal clear, that's exactly it.
All right, thank you.
I just had a question on the safety, right? You spoke to, the chief said that he had no, memory or knowledge of that. Is there any kind of stats to back that up? I mean, it just seems like taking a one-liner from the chief of police just doesn't seem like circumstantial evidence.
I mean, we would have to ask the police chief. At the public hearing, he had prepared to speak on safety, and he just mentioned that there's no statistics that show that the hotel crime rate is higher than a commercial use.
Gotcha. We don't have like a plot map of like where safety incidents occurred and the radius next to a hotel or anything like that versus an office park? All right.
Right.
Chris, this isn't verbatim, but from the meeting minutes of the May 6th Commissioners' meeting, Chief Graham said that currently throughout town, so not just the ones within the mile radius that's been spoke of, and they'll come up again in a bit, we apparently have 12 hotels in town. He said that HPD averages about 70 calls a year combined from those 12 hotels. The majority of the crimes that HPD has experienced tend to be property crimes, breaking into cars, larcenies, and things of that sort. There are a couple examples of simple assaults, very few serious crimes against persons and things of that nature. They do spend a lot of times at the hotels, but not for taking those calls. It's generally because they are open at night, so they're driving through, checking on the lots, checking in with staff at the front desk, and that type of thing. And so Chief essentially said that he would not say that currently the hotels in town, they're not one of their top priorities that they have issues with. Still not specific stats and what they are and where, and in a deeper dive into that. But he did at least offer that when it came for the public hearing. But
So to speak on Frank's earlier point about expert witnesses, in the special use permit application, expert witnesses, generally an expert witness is qualified by knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education to provide specialized knowledge to help the understanding of the evidence or the determination of facts. In that case, the police chief, in that definition, would be an expert witness.
Now, having done a number of these SUPs, along with the rezonings that go behind, I would just, sometimes we ask all our questions during the SUP and we don't ask any questions against the rezoning. I would contend that if you have questions that apply to the rezoning, once we get there, you may need to re-ask your same question so it goes on the record. please consider that.
Okay, any other questions of staff?
So it's just the fact that it's a hotel that's kicking off the SUP. If it was an apartment building, would it kick off the SUP?
It doesn't have those same standards. So 9.4.5 are specifically for hotels. You would have different other requirements like buffer yards and,
But that would be in a rezoning for a hotel.
right, and keep in mind too, an apartment complex would be a subdivision, so there would be a whole litany of other standards and requirements.
Gotcha, okay. And the other one on standing, would an adjacent property owner actually touch the line of the hotel? Would they have standing?
I'm not an attorney.
You're not an expert.
Just because you're a neighbor doesn't necessarily mean you have standing. There are certain factors you have to show that you had specific, trying to think of the word right now, specific, like, consequences isn't the right word, but there's a few different factors. Proximity is one factor. So if you're touching it, then that would be one major factor. Financial impact could be another. There's, it's a set of factors, but proximity is a factor.
Could be one of them, okay.
Jacob, you may have just said that and it went over my head, but the HOA is standing, correct?
I believe so. They probably would have standing.
Okay.
I would need to confirm that. I would need to.
All right, thank you.
But probably.
And then my other question, going back, Jesse, to your 5 things that you had, was one of them was harmony. How do you guys define harmony? I mean, the building that I saw didn't look like the current buildings that are out there, nor the single-family residences within 200 feet.
You look at a number of things. You look at do they meet the separation requirement? And what we looked at there was the minimum is 108 feet. The separation for the building is 200 feet. There is a 60-foot buffer separation, buffer, meaning from the edge of the parking lot to the adjacent single-family neighborhood is 60 feet. We can't positively say that vegetation can stay in that because it's an energy right-of-way. So the energy company does have the right to take down vegetation there. So in lieu of that, they have provided a alternative buffer. It is within the parking area, so that's something to keep in mind. However, the addition of the parking screening, the fencing, and the 60-foot separation buffer plus that alternative buffer makes us comfortable with the separation as far as staff goes. As far as the building goes, and I'll speak of this more in the rezoning, but it was not previously in harmony, meaning the architecture did not meet the minimum standards for the business part or the office part. They had standards for all brick buildings, and they have revised that to show that. So with those different factors in mind, we have determined staff that it is in harmony in regards to the special use permit. Sure.
And just one other comment of that. Jesse went through a lot of the factors. The school of government has also said that the fact that the use is even included as an option for a special use is a finding that the board or the town has found that it is at least compatible, generally compatible with harmony because they've included it even as an option. Jesse went through a lot, but the other examples are height, bulk, scale, design, and appearance of the specific proposal.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions of staff? No? Okay. If the applicant would like to come up, it's my understanding you have a presentation. If, as it's your turn to speak throughout all this, or if it's just one of you, name and address for the public record, and you will have 15 minutes.
you. And if I may hand these out, I don't know if we're going to need them here or for the rezoning part, but I thought I'd go ahead and pass those out. My name is Suzanne Todd. I'm a land use attorney in Charlotte. My address is 1065 East Moorhead Street, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28204. Good evening, Chairman Snide, members of the Planning Board. Again, my name is Suzanne Todd. Here on behalf of the applicant for this SUP, Hotel Ventures of Lake Norman, Inc. With me tonight is associate in our firm, Matthias Young, as well as the applicant, Hetish Patel, as well as Rakesh Patel, and also Tess Valova, who's a landscape architect working with us. So that's part of our development team. Mr. James did a good job covering sort of the requirements for the SUP. I know it's going to be a long night. I don't want to belabor anything. But I did just kind of want to run through, and part of this may be a recap, and you can tell me to move on. But just wanted to, again, the reason why we're asking for this SUP is because we are within 250 feet of a residential property line. So it could be, because our property line abuts their property line, an SUP is required for that. Oops, let me go back. Okay. I don't either. Did I go back into the, can you get me right?
Tracy can get you back on the.
Thank you. Okay. As mentioned, there is a separation requirement for the SUP. You have to be 3 times the height of the building. Our application is actually for up to 45 feet in building height. We are using and it's in the site plan, we're using a workforce building form, which allows up to 45 feet in height. This is a 3-story building. We don't think we'll need that, but because of, concerns about elevation, right now our elevations do show 36 feet height, and then additional, of course, parapet. But just out of abundance of caution, because that's the way we had it when we first submitted our application, we have asked for the up to 45 feet. So I just wanted to clarify that. So the required separation would be a little bit more than what Mr. James had, the 108. It would be required to be 135, but we are again providing 200 feet of separation from the building to the property line. Another requirement, and this is sort of a requirement, even a precursor for the SUP, is that you have access either on a local or collector street, currently, or I think a thoroughfare. Currently, this property is shown, or the property fronts off of North Point Executive Park Boulevard, and it is currently shown as a local street, classified. When it becomes accepted for maintenance, it will become a collector street. So we meet that criteria as well. And then the third one is that, again, sort of a precursor to the SUP, that all standards will be met and the proposed plan meets these standards, and that was in staff's finding. That we meet all the standards, and we did ask for one modification for the buffer, given that we've got the existing buffer that serves the office park is located in the utility easement, that we provide another buffer internal to the site, and then we use the perimeter plantings that are required for all parking lots to buffer that little piece of parking lot that would be left outside of the internal buffer. There's a lot of buffers. So having met those requirements, we move into the SUP standards, which Mr. James also highlighted. Again, the proposed special use will not materially endanger the public health or safety. I mean, a hotel will be built in compliance with building code, other applicable regulations to any commercial structure. Also have to get driveway permits. And also, the development will need to be reviewed and approved by Energy United, at least to that extent, that piece that's in the right-of-way easement. And there is actually a letter that we did send our plans to Energy United, had them look at that, had them review it, and they did actually approve the plans in that area. And they also when we go to talk about the buffer, the concern from staff, that was the approved office park buffer. But staff's concern was that could be eliminated. So we did get some clarification on, when can Energy United remove that buffer? And again, it's been there for over 20 years. So, and we did get them to clarify, only if a tree were to be, somehow either dead and leaning and maybe compromising their lines, could they remove that tree? Or, something that was somehow impeding their ability to maintain their lines. But otherwise, they're not going to disturb that. They're not going to clear cut it. And if they did, we would have the right to put it back. The second SUP standard is that the special use will not substantially injure the value of the budding property. And on that, we've offered, again, this is in an office park. It's been there. This is the last lot to be developed in this office park. It is 2 acres that really is the building envelope out of the 10, so 8 of this will remain undisturbed. It does have a site plan attached to it that was approved in 2007 for an office building that is actually closer than what we're proposing today. And we will have a appraiser that we've been working with, and he will be at the evidentiary hearing and make a presentation at that time. But in speaking to him, he has looked at hotels, he has looked at comparables, and he finds that based on the separation, the buffers that we're providing, that he will not find substantial, that it will not substantially injure the adjacent property values. So moving on to the third one, the proposed special use will be in harmony with the area in which is located in general conformity with the comprehensive plan. It is an interesting question, the harmony question, but as your attorney pointed out, the property is, when a use is, and hotel use is an allowed use in highway commercial zoning, subject to certain conditions. And when that use is designated by planning staff in a certain zoning district, it is deemed to be in harmony and compatible, because otherwise staff wouldn't put it in there. The building itself, let me look. And we actually may have this in a different slide. I did this again, didn't I? Okay. Apologize about that. We have, in fact, the buildings that are now painted white in that office park. The renderings that we have tonight are based on at dusk. They are actually a color palette that would match those office park buildings. They're 90% at this point brick. And so it's our contention that they do match and they do look very similar to what is out there. I think and we'll talk more about this in the rezoning section. It's hard. We have some things in the rezoning part and some things in the SUP, but we would say, that it is compatible, that it is harmonious with the other buildings in that office park. As far as meeting the comprehensive plan shows that this area is in a mixed-use center and town core character area. This hotel being in an office park, which is very consistent. Office parks and hotels go well together. Proximity to the highway is also a good fit. That would be a good mixed use. It creates that mixed use element in this commercial subdivision. These commercial uses are again encouraged in the town core, and the hotel use is common within a business park, and again, complements existing office uses. Get back to that last one. Am I just hitting this wrong? I do apologize. This is a tiny little button here. And then finally, the very last one is whether we comply with all the standards. And in fact, we do, except for that one deviation. And if I could just show y'all I'm going to do this again. If you just put it back on the site plan. Sure. Based on, staff's comments and the one modification that we requested, that it's in keeping with the spirit of the ordinance. So based on the evidence that we tend to present, the findings from staff, is our contention that we've met our burden of proof and that we are entitled to receive this special use permit for this use. Be happy to answer any questions. And apologize for sausage fingers.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for the applicants? Right?
Not necessarily for the applicant, for the staff. Have you gotten this letter, Jesse? Have you seen it? From Energy United?
It was submitted with our package.
I only asked because I had asked that question earlier in the process, and I was told that you guys didn't have it.
When was that letter submitted?
I'm sorry?
I have not seen the letter.
Okay.
I sat down to Jesse. I'll get another one. And Tracy, you may want to put one in the record since it was given to us. Number two is, Jesse, is a 45-foot hotel allowed here by zoning ordinance?
So the zoning ordinance for the building type does allow a 45-foot building. The elevations that were submitted were for 36 feet. That's what our evaluation was based on.
Okay, so 45 feet is okay by zoning ordinance?
Is permitted in highway commercial. You just have to increase the minimum separation, but the separation they have is 200. So.
All right, that's something you, planning department, will have to work out with the applicant before the next hearing. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, and I apologize if we have not sent over that letter. I understood that we had submitted it with our last resubmittal.
Jesse, just a quick follow-up question to Frank's. So 36 versus 45, we're still talking grade to floor, top of floor.
Grade to the.
So no parapets.
Well, so the way we measure height is from the grade to the top of the roof line, not the parapets on top of that. So you can enclose mechanical equipment or whatever type of equipment, as long as it's not a occupiable, space in that parapet area, then we just do from grade to roof line.
So 45 is allowed up to roof line?
Yes.
From grade, okay.
So to be clear, we're still talking about a 3-story hotel, not a 4-story hotel?
Yes.
All right.
There's no fourth floor.
And Mr. Patel could address it a little bit clearer maybe than I did as far as where we're looking for the little extra buffer. Our renderings elevations do show 36 feet, but we wanted to make sure that we had enough to accommodate.
Good evening, everybody. Hitesh Patel, Augusta, Georgia. So the elevations show at 36, but obviously we can go up to 45. We have no intention on trying to go to 45. We may need a few more feet from the 36 when we get later on into further engineering designs of the HVAC systems on the hotel. Marriott has recently made some changes where they want us to not just put fresh air into every room, but to recapture that air leaving the building and recirculate back to save energy costs. So those require extra ductwork at the roof level to capture everything.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so it seems like one of the requirements of the SUP is to prove that you're not going to hurt adjacent property values. And what I heard is you have an expert coming later to substantiate that evidence. So I guess I'm trying to figure out how we check that box without the expert weighing in those numbers at this point.
That's a great question, and our attorney will.
So tonight is not actually a quasi-judicial hearing, so technically you guys are not under the same standards. This is more of a run-through, so it's different in that sense. You're not actually performing the quasi-judicial hearing in the same way.
But aren't we voting on a SUP that requires that evidence, or no?
Yes, but again, yes.
It's not a perfect scenario having the SUP before a rezoning. So it makes, that's a good point you bring up. And when you talk about the property values, how do you claim that at this meeting without that? I mean, it's a good question.
So I would say, as the planning board, you can make up your own findings of fact. Staff has put together their SUP recommendation, findings of fact. So if you're seeing and you're going through the 5 portions of the ordinance and you don't see evidence of it, I would put that in your motion and recommend it.
Yes, sir.
Your recommendation could be based on the applicant producing that evidence at the evidentiary hearing.
Talking about the buffer and the Energy United, I think they specifically state that any trees or plantings that could be replaced or replanted at the expense of the owner. Is there anything that requires the owner to replace those in the event that happens?
Do you want me to answer that?
I believe you have that in your site plan, that if vegetation is removed, you will plant it back. So the rezoning plan and the SUP plan do state that if vegetation is removed, the owner will replace it at their expense.
Okay, so it throughout the project, it still must meet those standards. Even if something's removed, they have to go back in and modify it or replace the vegetation.
Correct.
Okay.
And it might be a good idea too, when you have a motion, to require this to be submitted at the next submittal, because we have not reviewed this as staff, other than what I just read.
While we're on the buffer, so I saw if something dies, you need to replace it. What about the idea of actually planting it? What prevents us from planting it? Could we ask United Energy to allow a row of crepe myrtles or something like that?
Absolutely.
Okay, because that would really help with the.
If you find that the existing buffer that's been growing over the last 30 years isn't substantial enough, then that's something you could.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it is.
You could ask
Okay,
for.
okay.
Okay, any more questions for staff or the applicant?
One more on the buffer, just looking at this plan, it looks like the 30-foot landscape buffer goes into some abutting properties. Is that allowed? Like, you call that a buffer using their backyards? Or
It's
what am I
actually
looking
the
at?
backyards
Reading
are
it
using
backward.
are using the property's buffer.
It doesn't, okay.
There are fences from the adjacent property owners and, other plantings?
If you were to look at a ortho picture of the property, there are some fence lines within this property, the proposed hotel property. But the 30-foot buffer on this plan does have some tree and shrub elements within it.
Yeah, the white dotted line is the actual property line.
Oh, it is, okay. It doesn't look that way on some of your drawings that I was looking at in the thing. It looks like their properties jump over. Okay.
Question, so the actual property line doesn't stop at the right-of-way, it extends 30 feet beyond it?
No, the property line is in white.
Correct, but it extends beyond the, it doesn't stop at the right-of-way, at the utility easement, it actually goes beyond that, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, no, I think that utility line is 100 feet in, and it goes from that property line. Does that make
My
sense?
understanding is the entire easement, 100-foot easement, also includes the 30-foot buffer.
Yes.
That's correct.
So if you're going from the northern boundary line, property line, you go
This is-
100 feet down from that, but the first 30 feet is also the buffer that's being referenced.
That's what I
And
was
there's
trying to-
Another 70.
To add to that, that's the reason, because starting at the property line going in 100 feet, that's why we've asked for an additional alternative buffer with the existing 30-foot buffer, is because of that element that it could be removed. And then you've got trees that have been growing for 30, however many years. Now you've got to start from ground zero at like a 10-foot tree. So the hope is that internal buffer just supplements that.
So what about the access road? Like, where is that in that section there? Is there an access road back there? Is that what you spoken of previously? No?
There would be a BMP maintenance access, but there's not an access road.
Okay, any other questions of staff or the applicant? No? Okay. I will accept the motion. Go ahead.
In considering the special use permit, SUP 24-01 North Point Hotel, the planning board finds that the request meets all required conditions and specifications and is reasonable. The planning board further finds that the impact upon the character of the neighborhood as well as the health, safety, and general welfare of the community will be minimized. This decision is supported by the Town of Huntersville zoning ordinance as stated in Part 3 staff findings of the staff report as follows. 1, the request meets the zoning ordinance criteria of Article 9.45. 2, the request meets the zoning ordinance criteria of Article 11.4.10E2. The request is consistent with Huntersville 2040 Community Plan Policies, LU6, LU 6.1, LU 6.2, and the plan's recurring theme to maintain or exceed the current percentage of tax revenue from non-residential uses. The planning board agrees with staff findings as stated above and recommends approval of the applicant's special use permit to build a hotel and property adjacent to a residential zone, a zone district. This recommendation for approval is contingent upon, 1, the applicant providing satisfactory expert testimony at the quasi-judicial hearing that shows there is no harm to property values. 2, approval of the rezoning petition R24-01 North Point Hotel by the town board. End.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Discussion, Mr. Gammon?
This is only a recommendation to the board. Turned it off. This is only a recommendation to the board. It's not the decision by the board. The board gets to make the decision. Our decisions are based on the technical matters of the zoning, or does the material meet the zoning ordinance and the Huntersville 2040 plan? And is it reasonable? And also, does it meet the SUP requirements? I took out one sentence here to let you know. Usually you say, "and does not pose an injurious effect on adjoining," well, no, I got to add that back in. I took something out I should have added. So I'll have an amendment, Tracy, in a moment. I need to add back in at the beginning, and I'll restate the first couple of sentences. And considering the special use permit SUP 24-01 North Point Hotel, the planning board finds that the request meets all required conditions and specifications, is reasonable, and does not pose an injurious effect on adjoining properties. So that's corrected. That's based on the chief's testimony. This is only one, that's right. And do you agree to the amendment? Thank you. So that's where I stand, and that's why I do this. This is, it's technical. It doesn't matter whether I like this plan or dislike this plan. My job is to see, does it meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance and is legal?
Just a quick question. I don't know if we can have questions now, but injurious effects, I don't think that's just to safety, right? That could be to property values, and we don't know that. I mean, I know you had your stipulation in the end for expert witness, but you're stating a fact by saying it does not pose an injurious effect on adjoining properties at the beginning.
You know, you may be right, and that's why I took it out the first time. Go back to the first edition. I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. Thank you for pointing it out. That's why I drew a line through that when I did that. No, you're exactly right. I'll let Jacob chime in.
I think it's fine either way because you also incorporated staff's finding and because you made the condition, because you incorporated staff finding, which I think found to that effect.
I'll go with my first iteration and take out the second. Thank you, Jacob.
Mr. James, you said in part of our motion you would recommend that we require them to submit the Energy United letter. Was that it?
Good idea, because it was presented at this meeting.
Mr. Gammon, I'd like to amend your motion to add that the applicant is also required to submit into the record the Energy United letter dated.
Say it clearly so Tracy can hear you.
Say it louder, Tracy. I'd like to amend your motion that requires the applicant to submit the letter to the record from Energy United on May 2nd, 2024.
Agreed.
Just, I guess, another question. I was going to hold my suggestion to plant the right-of-way until the rezoning, if that's the right place for it. Okay. Okay.
Do you agree with the second amendment that was?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you were calling on me. Yep. I just want to echo what Frank said, and a lot of us, we're the mechanical arm of this thing. It's the emotional arguments go before the commissioners, so just double down on that. We're just looking to see if we met the letter of the ordinance here, or the SUP. Thank you.
For myself, I just want to point out I will not be supporting this, and the reason for tonight is, while not, I know this isn't quasi-judicial, so we have the extra flexibility to weigh it how we want. When it comes to negatively affecting property values, and we don't have that evidence tonight, I have to weigh that. And why I say that is because even if someone was willing to put that into their motion, that as we move forward, that has to be presented at the actual quasi-judicial. For me, if I were to approve an amended motion like that, that's saying that I'm okay with whatever's presented going forward. And in the past, I have not been okay with the quality of what's been put before us when someone has done it. Someone has had their expert here for this portion. And so just to be consistent with how I've done it in the past, I'll be a no on this. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3. Any opposed? 2, 3, awesome. What's that?
Too late for comments.
Well, yeah. I don't think we've ever had a tie.
Yeah. No, I would just go,
We have to revote, or no? 5 years up here, Jacob.
It
Never
would
done
be
this.
best if you could reach a decision. So I would suggest more comments and another motion and try to get to a majority decision.
If we're allowed to do more discussion, then we'll have at it.
Correct.
Thank you. I just didn't want to get in trouble. Yes, sir.
I was actually going to be in support of it for the reasons that Frank mentioned. Again, this is an objective decision for us. It's the facts-based. But as Chairman Snide just said, one of the most important things I think here is, does it affect property values, or could it affect property values? And unfortunately, I don't think the evidence has been presented to us today for that. So for that reason, I did not support it.
I think one of the instructions was we could create our own narrative, our own facts, right? So the property value things I'm kind of basing on, this is a stretch, I know. But when the properties in the neighborhood were originally sold, they were aware there was a business park back there. And those values presume it was going to be back there. It was already planned, I believe. Maybe not. Not a hotel. I know not a hotel. I know not a hotel. But I think the history showed that was it highway commercial at the time?
Yes, highway commercial for office use.
So,
Prior to the development of the neighborhood.
Oh, no, prior to,
Folks, I'm talking to him.
are you talking about prior to the office park being rezoned? What was it? Or are you talking about with the office park?
I guess this would go back at least a month ago, now that I think about it, because I had asked you about that, knowing that this was coming. What did we, I got to go back in my notes now. What did we determine? Because I was asking, who was first? Planned neighborhood or planned?
The neighborhood was first.
Yes.
Yes, and then the office park was rezoned to highway commercial
Yes.
after the fact.
Okay. So Lee, that's what I was getting at.
They are different jurisdictions, but
Yes.
Do we know what it was before highway commercial? Do we know what it was before highway commercial?
I've got a slide on that in the rezoning. I believe it was neighborhood residential prior to highway commercial. The last amendment was highway commercial to highway commercial. Prior to the office park, I believe it was neighborhood residential. And I've got that in a backup slide in the rezoning. It was neighborhood residential, I'm almost positive.
okay. I'll still see if I can wrap my point around.
Let him finish.
So, and we all do this, we all do our due diligence when we're looking at properties, right? We go in and say, who's beside me, who's behind me, what could it be? Is it gonna be a chicken house or whatever? And you do your due diligence and you accept or reject based on that. So I've gotta think that the property values already reflect having neighbors that aren't residential, especially if the house is turned over in the last 20 years. I think that value's already in there. I'm no real estate expert. I'm just, and I would encourage the folks in Stratford Farms to go get their own real estate appraisal and do all that due diligence work. Go find a hotel abutting residential and get history on it and see if you can prove that it does devalue. But that's where I base my opinion on that one. Thank you.
Just one point. Jesse, I did find our email exchange, and it went from neighborhood residential to highway commercial conditional district on March 1st, 1999. So Stratford Forest was first, at least with just respect to that very specific.
There was an
thing that we were
amendment
discussing.
to allow an additional story in the highway commercial, so it went from highway commercial to highway commercial for an additional story.
Right.
But yes, previous to that, it was neighborhood residential.
But the highway commercial does permit a hotel.
It does with conditions that we saw
as a special use permit conditions. Okay.
When it's adjacent to a single-family neighborhood. So in this case, it is permitted with a special use permit because of that situation.
Lee, to your point, I would certainly like to think that anyone that has come in after, I did not look at, so there's 6 properties directly adjacent plus HOA property. I did not look to see if those 6 properties are the original owners and when that specific house was built. But under the assumption that aside from those folks, everyone else coming in, I would like to think would know, or it would certainly be obvious at this point. That I moved here 12 years ago. That parcel's been for sale the entire time I've lived in North Carolina. Okay, so it's knowing that something is coming there. No, it's not a hotel. But, so, in my professional opinion, given that's my wheelhouse, yes, that would be for those, at least for those 6 properties. That theoretically should be factored in already. So, and at some point back in the day, I did show one of those, and that was one of the things. We stood in the backyard, and we're kind of, it's like, well, at some point, something is going to be here. What do you think? And we were trying to project as best as we could. It's still been for sale for a number of years, and I don't know, that was a long time ago. But, so do I think that's the case? It's likely. Is that still going to turn some people off? Yes. Is a business, like an office building, going to turn some people off? Yes. And same with homes where they back up to a power tower. That turns off some people, other people, they don't care. So, I mean, it does get down, and the market figures it out, right? And so from that aspect, I completely hear what you're saying. It's in this, though, where, and again, I understand this isn't quasi-judicial for us, but when the initial burden falls on the applicant, I try and put the stress and the leverage against that, because if I let that pass through, and now the counter burden falls on the residents of the neighborhood, that's a much larger burden potentially for them from a financial aspect, a knowledge-based aspect, and a timing thing too. I mean, at this point, like if I go for, say I put one of my buyers under contract on a house, and we need to do an appraisal. I mean, the turnaround's almost 14 days, depending on who the lender is or whatever. And so you're burning time right there. And so just the amount of time. So I'm not faulting the applicant for not having the appraiser here. It's fine. It's not quasi-judicial, but just historically, when this has come before us in the past, that has been one of my things. And we've even had the expert here, and I wasn't remotely impressed with what was put before us, and that was not to knock that person's credentials. They were more credentialed than I am, by far. It's just that burden. It's what we were offered in that. It was almost like it didn't answer the question. It was a bunch of numbers. I know what they were doing, but it's like, how do I take what you've just presented as proof and now look at, does this answer the future burden or negative effect on their value? So that's the only reason, and it's consistent with what I've done in the past. I know they'll come up in the actual quasi-judicial, and they'll present and they'll have their expert testimony, and other folks may have counter expert testimony, and that's fine. That's how it's supposed to work. But that's where I'm at with that.
I'm not going to try to address property values. None of us here, unless somebody's surprised me and I didn't know it. No one up here is a property adjuster and can judge whether if something's injurious or not. So, Jacob, I have a question for you, I think, if I haven't forgotten it. Maybe I've forgotten it. But, so where do we go from here?
Well, you've had some discussion. Preferably, somebody would make another motion, motion, and then a second, and you'd vote on it again and see what happens.
I'll make a comment. My comment is that, Jeff, you're never satisfied with the person that comes in here with the money. You never agree with them. I know that. But that's beside the point. Now, I know what my question was for you, and that was, what can the board consider from our motion and our discussion tonight?
Not really anything.
That's right.
Yeah.
All we're doing is moving this forward for them to make a decision based on a quasi-judicial hearing.
Correct.
And so I say that even though that's the way it is, I wish the applicant had brought someone in here to do that tonight. But whether somebody who really supports this votes negative, it doesn't make any difference. It's going to the town board for approval or disapproval. So a decision will be made. Without our discussion.
As I mentioned, this is more of a test run, so it's more to give, you guys to ask questions that they can then consider and use at the next meeting.
I do want to add, just out of fairness, that we didn't have the appraiser here tonight. We don't have a finished product because this has been through at least 3 revisions, so many changes that we were initially giving the appraiser, okay, would you add a fence? Does that do anything? Would you do this? Would you do that? And finally, we just said, we're going to wait for the final product, and then we're going to hand him all the information and let him do his analysis. So that's why we don't have anything tonight. I can forecast that based on what was provided thus far, that he found no substantial reduction in property values. But, I don't have the final for you. But we do have, there are comparables to this property. Recently, one of these houses did sell, but we don't have, we're not experts, but we can tell you that with, based on what was approved, and this office park has been there since, I think it was 1999, the houses were there before, which means that they had both the opportunity in 1999 to consider the rezoning. The property owners had an opportunity to speak, and I guess that's how that buffer came about. And again, in 2007, and this entire time this has been going on, and that was really the only buffer for and we'll get more into this in the rezoning, but that would be the only buffer for the office building.
Yep.
The fact that we've got this additional separation, the fact that we've got basically double, if not triple buffers through the perimeter parking, as well as the buffer on the interior of the site, the reduction to 3 stories, which is identical to what was being presented or what was being allowed on the site plan. I'm not an expert, but based on those facts, you could find that this would not negatively impact property values.
Yeah. And so I hear that, and to my fellow board members, I certainly wasn't trying to sway you in either direction or be the downer. As Frank pointed out, I'm rather difficult when it comes to the numbers. And that's okay. We do have, however we go on this, in whichever direction, we have a whole other piece to this. And I think a lot of that comes into play. This is very specific to the SUP itself, whether the criteria is met or not. And that's what I would say you base your decision on, because a lot of the additional stuff would flush out in the rezoning agenda item. Yes, sir.
I would just make a comment to everybody on the board as well as everybody here is that our recommendation, again, will not even be heard by the town board. So there's a level of frustration, like, well, why are we all here? I will tell you, there's some real value in this. I always look at us as a board. Part of our biggest responsibility is to make sure that we're doing everything we can when one of these cases come before the board, that we kind of do some of the dirty work, some of the tough work, some of the back and forth. And I hope you guys all leave here realizing that I think the applicants learned something. I think everybody that opposed to this has learned something. So I would just encourage you that this is still beneficial to all parties, even though the town board will not be able to consider what we've discussed here today.
Can I add some?
Is it going to be comps?
Sorry, what was that?
Is it going to be comps? Is that what you were?
Yeah.
Me personally, I would say.
Recent sales. To be
Right, and so here's the thing though, that I would argue professionally, as having done residential sales for 10 years. The comps that have happened recently, or I would say at least before this was proposed and officially, and then we hope all parties were made aware that we're involved in whichever transaction we'd be talking about. But if it's even just before that, to me, I find it irrelevant because we're talking about looking forward. And I understand a straight appraisal is backwards looking and trying to bring the value to that very moment when the appraisal is being done. So I do understand that. It's the forward-looking piece where we need to be able to project based on what's going to be there versus the theoretical. As far as me and to my board members, if you want to hear these comps, that's fine. To me, it doesn't change my mind at all, just because I find them irrelevant, honestly. So that's okay. Do you guys need to count? Would that help you one way or the other?
Jeff, aren't you waiting on a comp in turning this down? Aren't you waiting on a comp that you just said you don't trust? I mean,
No.
There's no way
what I'm
an
waiting
expert
on-
can give us a forward-looking statement on comparatives.
I would just say, even though this is not quasi-judicial, if we're pretending it is, the applicant can't give us comps because he's not an expert, no more than any of you all can give us comps because you're not expert. So in that point, I don't think it's worth us considering, even though you made a very valid point, not being an expert, we couldn't take into account if this was quasi-judicial. So for me, it's not necessary.
If the applicant had brought someone here tonight and laid out their position on property values, how would you have voted? If they had an expert here tonight that was addressing property values and the effect of this project on property values, how would you have voted tonight?
Boy, it's your last meeting. You think you can just?
I'll ask a question.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I will answer that. On the technical merit of the SUP, I had no other issues.
And Scott, how would you have voted if an expert was here tonight and they had made that?
I don't think I can't answer that because the information is not presented one way or the other. It's not.
I probably would have voted yes, but we still don't have safety data. So
I have the safety data from the police chief, and the police chief will provide that data, I'm
can do
sure,
better.
at the board.
we can do better.
We're putting ourselves in an impasse, and the impasse is maybe not advantageous to anyone, and that is a deferral. You're requiring a deferral in order to get an expert here to hear that's going to get you to vote yes.
Okay.
That you would have voted yes if they were here.
Jacob, for us to do a revote, does it have to be a new motion? Does it have to be substantially
It would
different,
have to be
slightly
a
different?
new motion, yes. And I will note, the point of discussion actually was to change, hopefully, at least one person's mind. If somebody said, this condition could be different, then I'd approve. That was the point. So yes, we would, if you could make one more motion and at least one more motion to see if the board can get approval on one way or another.
Thank you. Well, but it's got to be different.
It doesn't have to be.
No, you're asking me to amend the motion.
No, it doesn't have to be different, right?
No, he just said, didn't he?
You can't call
Not
it,
a-
you can't call a second vote? It was of the same motion.
So if he, let's get right to the point. If he repeats the same motion, it's acceptable for us to vote on it again? Or does it have to have some sort of difference?
Calling well, I wish I had the rules of procedure in front of me right now. Yes, I think if you just called you could either say the same motion or call a second vote.
Call a second vote. It hadn't been denied. Right?
That's fair, too.
It's not a denial.
That's fair.
It's calling a second vote.
All right. Does everybody remember the motion? Anybody need it
Oh, I
read
can read
again?
it again.
I'd rather you not.
Yeah.
Unless it's needed. Anybody need it again? No? Okay.
And then I think it would be best to specifically make a motion and a second saying that you are.
Read it again, please, sir.
No, not the same motion, but that you are doing another vote on this motion.
I'll make a motion, we do another vote on this topic.
I'll second that.
Can he do that since he seconded and voted for the motion? I don't know that. Robert's rules may not allow that. Can he do that since he voted for it last time? Who can technically make the motion according to Robert rules?
I would like to make a motion that we call a second vote for the motion that's presented before us.
And I'll second that. All those in favor of having a revote? Any opposed? Yeah. So you're good with, okay. Unanimous on revoting. Perfect. Now, the second vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's, okay. No clapping, please. Again, it's not a performance.
1 second.
What?
Now that motion
Now we
lost
need a vote on
Correct.
a motion. We have to approve a motion
to deny, correct?
to deny.
Which would have made sense to do that first, but I now see, but yes, we should have now one more motion.
Jacob, we want to follow the rules, man. Let's do that.
I'm not reading one.
I have a motion.
Perfect.
In considering the special use permit SUP 2401 North Point Hotel, we, the planning board, find that the request does not meet the required conditions and specifications. List conditions that are not being met. They don't have comps, they don't have safety safety data, make sure that gets in there. And I still don't think it's harmonious, but that might get some other people off my side. In addition, the uses pose an injurious effect on adjoining properties, and the planning board finds, well, that's a fact too. The use poses, I don't know if it poses an injurious effect because they didn't bring all the data to the table. And the planning board finds that the request is not in character of the neighborhood, and there might be a negative effect on health and safety. We don't have any safety data to actually substantiate that, and the welfare of the surrounding community based on no safety data.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion? Chris, you want to go forward? It was yours.
I mean, yeah, I just feel like we're missing some things here and we're going off a little half. And I would like all the evidence to make a clear decision. It just seems like we got a SUP, we got 5 things you've got to check off, and we didn't bring at least one of them to the table, if not 2. I just don't understand why we're talking about it. They need another month to fix it.
Then I have a substitute motion. I make a motion that this application be deferred because we do have incomplete information to make a decision.
Okay. We have a substitute motion on the table that needs to be addressed first. Do I have a second on the substitute motion? Okay, that does not carry.
Okay.
Back to the motion by Chris. We had a second by Scott. Chris, you are all set with your discussion?
Feel free to amend. I know that was a very emotional motion.
Scott?
No, again, I think my outstanding issue is that there's not evidence, as Chris stated, that talks about whether or not there'll be any property values that could be harmed in this. Do I think that they will bring that forward before the town board? I think they probably will. And then the decision by the town board will be subjective. And if they get evidence, this SUP will pass. That's what I think. But also, I think our job here is to do what we've done. I don't think we can discuss it any further to get any more out of what we're trying to do here. So I'll support the motion.
Any other discussion on that?
I'll just go back and I'll say what I heard in that motion was that all the relevant facts weren't presented, and that's why that motion was made for denial. And if all the relevant material was not provided, then it should be deferred until that material is provided. But that vote is come and gone.
And I know where you're coming from with that, because we have done that before. I'm on. But it hasn't been an SUP where what we're talking about doesn't move up to the board. I know the applicant team has heard us, and like Scott said, I'm certain they've already said they'll be prepared for that. They'll have their expert, and if they're not, then the board gets to make their decision.
Well, I would contend that the applicant probably didn't want a deferral anyway. This is going to move forward, and none of these comments are going to the town board. So
Frank, I would probably support your deferral if our recommendations tonight were actually moved forward to the town board. Unfortunately, they're not. Again, if this was a rezoning, I would be more likely to support that. But in this case, it simply is not going to happen. And I think we've done the best we can with what our job is here, which is to hopefully get the applicant and everybody else involved to bring a better product forward for the town board. That's our job.
That's what we've done for 6 years. Some of us, we don't always agree, but we all agree to disagree. We're good.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor of Chris's motion to deny the SUP? Any opposed? Is there an amendment that can be made to the motion to move the needle for anyone? Any discussion topics that could potentially address a concern to have you go one way or the other? You're thinking of something, it's okay. I'm not holding you hostage, I just. Okay. Let's try it one more time. Chris's motion. All those in favor of denial of the SUP? Those opposed? Motion carries 4-2. All right.
And that was fun. Let's do that again.
Well, and we will. Let's now move on to considering a recommendation for petition R24-01. This is a request by Hotel Ventures of Lake Norman, again, to rezone approximately 10.3 acres located at 8830 North Point Executive Park Drive, going from Highway Commercial Conditional District to Highway Commercial Conditional District for a 3-story hotel development. Mr. James, let's talk rezoning.
All right, thank you, sir. 2401 North Point Hotel, please enter the staff report into the record. So you've already mentioned everything. We've talked about the site plan, where it's at, the district that it's going from to. It's a 3-story hotel, 121 room. context map we looked at previously. So what we're going to mainly talk about tonight here, since we had the public hearing, are updates since the public hearing. In the public hearing, staff requested that along North Cross Drive, the applicants upgrade the 5-foot sidewalk they proposed to a 10-foot sidewalk that meets the adopted bikeway plan that was not a part of Huntersville during the original subdivision. So we feel that with any new rezonings that meeting the bikeway plan across North Cross Drive is appropriate for a 10-foot side path. The applicant has agreed to that to the extent practical, given the right-of-way constraints with the energy regulator station there at the corner. Another update, the applicants have agreed to make the improvements on North Point Executive Park Drive prior to CO. The important part of that is for this to be a legal development in the town's ordinance, it has to front on a thoroughfare or a collector street. When that is accepted for maintenance with improvements made, then it will be just that. The third element of updates is revised elevations. Spoke of that a little bit previously. The previous proposal was 100% EFS, not enough windows to satisfy staff's requirements on the front. The updated version has added a more pronounced entrance on the front, emphasizing the human scale, adding some fenestration and window on the front so you can kind of see through and make it more inviting, and has incorporated 90% brick with just an EFS secondary element to the materials. And again, the office park is brick. That brick below on the bottom picture is now painted a lighter color. I believe it's white or tan. So the applicants have proposed to match that with similar earth tone colors. And here is the parking lot rear and the front and the side elevations that they have revised. As far as whether it meets the 2040 community plan or not, the proposal does support a mix of land uses that is called out in the 2040 plan. Hotels are common in business parks and can be complementary to the use, the existing uses. The proposal still to staff does not necessarily meet excellence in design based on some of the concerns. An example would be concerns of the third floor windows facing the residential neighborhood to the rear. Those comments were made at the public hearing. And while the applicant has made drastic improvements to the design, there still were some missing elements there. I believe the applicants would like to speak on that, but that's our take on the community plan. So moving to the staff recommendation and consistency statement, and considering the proposed rezoning petition R2401 North Point Hotel, staff recommends approval as we find the proposal is generally compliant with the town of Huntersville site design, architectural standards, and its consistency with the community plan policies LU 6, 6.1, 6.2. Given the distance of separation between the proposed use and the adjacent use, we believe the buffer meets the intent of the ordinance with the several reiterations of the interior buffer and the 60-foot separation with existing buffer to remain, as well as parking lot buffers and a privacy fence. Conditions for the approval, we do support the buffer modification. A condition would be the applicant still agrees to make the required improvements to North Point Executive Park Drive prior to the C of O. And then the rezoning approval of R9810 and R0717 required the developers of the business park to dedicate and construct the 35-foot right-of-way connector to Townley Road. Whenever that bridge does get built, the applicants have agreed to move that note from those two rezonings through. And then any other staff comments remaining based on our last cycle of reviews to be addressed as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. James. Questions for staff?
Jesse, what can be, other than this hotel with special use permit and the rezoning, what else can be built on this property? Can apartments be built on this apartment?
No, currently an office building, 3-story office building.
3-story office building? Okay, so an apartment couldn't go in here even with a request for special use permit or rezoning?
They would have, well, yes, they would have to come in for a rezoning.
Right. Okay. And
Anything that is allowed in highway commercial, they could come in to amend the rezoning to allow
Yeah.
that. Given the standards within the ordinance would still need to be met, similar to this.
okay, so Stafford Forest was developed around 1997? Okay, 94, thank you.
The maps that were previously shown that was the latest aerials we have.
Right.
Just showing that the neighborhood did come before the.
And the business park was approved and developed when?
The office park was approved in '99. I believe it was developed around 2001.
Okay. When the business park was approved, was the requirement for a buffer with Stafford Forest subdivision? And how much was it? The history of that?
Yeah, the subdivision that was approved and the rezonings that were approved had a 30-foot buffer adjacent to the property, the single-family property line. So
But it didn't take the easement of Energy United into consideration? All right. So when I look at this, the zoning ordinance currently requires a 30-foot buffer along residential zone property lines, but in this case, it's being said that the buffer cannot be built because of the Energy United easement, and that Energy United may disturb the buffer in the future. But the applicant is building a parking lot 40 feet into the easement. Might not Energy United disturb the parking lot and all the vegetation on that site?
That's a risk that the applicants would take, and they would have to answer that question. I haven't heard approval of the parking lot to Energy United. However, if Energy United is okay with it, that's where those buffers stand.
Well, it's not in the record, but what I read in the letter that was given to me was that they, with stipulations, they supported the development.
And anything that staff recommends at this date would not count that letter in the case for the rezoning until
All right.
it's officially signed.
What other alternatives were considered for the buffer along the property line?
From memory, reiterations with the buffering, what really happened was with that 100-foot right-of-way easement from the property line in, that limited the ability to have parking in that area. So through several meetings and comments, we basically just put it to the applicants to come up with a creative alternative buffer to supplement the existing buffer that could be demoed. And our thought process behind that was if the interior buffer grows for 20 years and for some odd reason the energy company does decide they need to clear the existing buffer, you do have that difference in between that can grow while they prepare to plant back what's existing.
Okay. So this is probably a question that I'll ask the applicant later, or they can answer it when they go. Was it ever considered to go ahead and just build a 30-foot buffer along the property line by the applicant and by the planning department? And what changed their mind if that's the case?
Yeah, I believe that question was asked several times, but it came down to their ability to meet the parking requirements. And if you were to take the 30-foot buffer out of the middle of the property that they've proposed, the alternative, and you did put it on the outside, it would still be under that right-of-way easement with the.
All right. Then I have the same question for the applicant whenever they come up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jesse, I'm a little slow sometimes. You might have to repeat it for me. Same question that Frank asked, but we're going from highway commercial conditional district to highway commercial conditional district. I understand. Is it because the current plan is site-specific that specifically states it is an office there?
Exactly. Yep. So with it being conditional district approval, that currently the only thing that can go on that site is an office building. And they were originally approved at 2, came back for amendment for 3-story. So that was what the second rezoning was for.
But again, if somebody were to research it today and called you all and research it, would be expectation that it would only be an office building there. Okay.
So what about the special use permit? So it cannot be rezoned unless the special use permit would pass,
In
correct?
this situation, they do need a special use permit to pass. If one passes and the other does not, they don't.
So with this not passing, like, for instance, like, when, with the board, with this not passing, they would never even get to the rezone, correct? Okay.
If the SUP didn't pass, it wouldn't go to the rezone and vice versa. So the SUP could pass and the rezoning has decided that it's not appropriate. So then you revert back to it can be an office building still.
It could be an office building by right, correct? They could come in there and do that without even coming to the town?
Yes, by right in the sense that it had a rezoning to allow the office building.
It already had a rezoning to allow a 3-story office building. Somebody could come in and do that tomorrow. They could. And that office building would be much closer to those property lines in that case, wouldn't it? Couldn't it?
I believe slightly from the site plan that was submitted in the subdivision and the rezoning plan. Yeah, technically the building is a larger footprint and it is closer to the adjacent property line. Now granted, that was just a conceptual plan. It would still need to come in for construction plans to staff to meet all the standards.
Right.
That exist
But
today.
it wouldn't have to adhere to the 3 times building height.
No, that's just.
That's just for a hotel. So we could really, not the previous plan submitted, but a new plan could really have it within 30 feet of the property line.
No, because there is parking requirements, and we don't allow the parking on the front. So with the building being in the front, there would still be amount of parking behind it. So I don't think there would ever be a case where the building would be 30 feet close to the property line, because we also have build-to lines. So the building has to be, it can't be any further than 15 feet off of the road.
Okay, I was
But the
envisioning
parking, the parking certainly could be closer.
Yeah, and the building could too, right? Just is my point, because it could be,
Because of
it could be
the-
side-loaded.
Because of the mass,
parking. Yeah,
the mass of the building.
okay. That's all for now.
Just to kind of build on that, so we talked about office building being there. Is like a 24-hour operation, like let's just say somebody had a 24-hour, phone service or something like that. I mean,
There's nothing that prohibits.
yeah, like there's nothing that says it's got to be a 9 to 5 business.
Right.
Obviously most of them are, but it
Typical
could
office
be,
building's 9 to 5, but if someone had a 24-hour office,
yeah.
nothing in the zoning ordinance has that would prohibit that, nor does the current rezoning prohibit that.
And the office building wouldn't necessarily have to build that fence either, correct? They could be closer to that 30-foot buffer with no 6-foot vinyl fence as well.
They would still have the parking lot screening that the applicants today have proposed, but we wouldn't necessarily require the fence that they've proposed.
Let's keep on going down the what-if line. So I'm envisioning the Huntersville Business Park and those businesses in there. So it's an office park, so it could also have soft industrial like Gibbs Racing. I mean, it'd still have to go through conditional zoning.
No, it would need to be a traditional office-style building. Couldn't be like a warehouse where you have an office within it. So like a race car team wouldn't be able to have, you know, pull out doors in the back to have that sort of office.
Couldn't have it, or could?
Could not have it.
Could they not come to a rezoning in
They-
highway commercial and get that? If
Anyone can,
Yeah.
anyone can apply for a rezoning to do just about anything that's in the.
in highway
zoning
commercials, yeah, that was my point. Okay, thanks.
The park, though, is its own beast and falls under zoning rules that predate the town's creation of their sort of core zoning rules in, what, 96 or something? And so
Yeah,
theirs predates that, so.
99, and I think there was the amendment in 2007, I believe.
I was just looking at all things possible in highway commercial, because that's its base zoning. That was my only point.
Gotcha.
This property is within a quarter mile of the bus rapid transit station, correct?
I do not have that information.
Folks, when we ask a question, it is not to you, all right? I mean, I
know
keep
there's
covering
one in
it.
close
It
proximity.
is for this way, and the idea is that when you had something to share, it's sign on that paper and then stand up there and share it with us. So our sole focus is on you in your 3 minutes. That is your right, regardless of what town you live in, and that is the respect that we afford you. When you are now in the audience and talking or doing whatever it is you want to do, that now keeps us from focusing on what we're trying to do, which is make a decision for our citizens, and in this case, citizens of another town. If there is something that you hear now at this point, and it is incorrect, wasn't answered to your liking, you can email the town board, you can email town staff, you can come up when it goes in front of the board again for the official vote, and you can speak at public comments. But I would love to get through this, and I would love to get through it with the information that we are asking, so please.
So
The point I'm trying to get at, Jesse, is I think it probably is, it may not be, that's fine. But it could be rezoned TOD.
anyone can apply for any rezoning, whether or not it's appropriate, you know, it takes analysis and looking at the ordinance.
And TOD has unlimited density there. You can have, well, like what is it, Town One? It's next to.
You gotta look at things like spot zoning too. I mean, we haven't done that analysis, but anyone can certainly apply for TOD there. They could apply for special purpose. They could apply for anything within the.
And I'm not saying it would ever be approved.
Yeah.
But it still could be asked, somebody could try to rezone TOD and maybe TODE, which would allow them to build up to how many stories?
I believe 8.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a couple questions for staff. The TIA came back and it said something that I've not encountered before in reading the results of it. It said that there was 0 extra peak, or I should say 0 peak trips created above and beyond what was already approved. Do we know what that number was? Do we know what was already approved?
We do not have engineering here with us, but the number from the TIA application, their anticipated daily trips was 104. So it wouldn't be higher than what it was originally. So it's lower than what was originally approved for the TIA. But to answer your question more directly, I do not have what that previous rezoning TIA determined. Engineering does their review of the TIA application to determine whether or not a new TIA is required. In this case, it was not.
Gotcha. All right. Let's see. Actually, that was
Impact analysis.
my only question for staff. Anybody else have questions for staff? No? Okay. the applicant, do you have a presentation specific to the rezoning? You do? And that's okay, I was just, I didn't want to jump ahead of that. So we'll go through it again. I shouldn't say again, because it's a different,
Well, and I'm going to work.
the process, I will say, so if you would just name and address again, we will give you 15 minutes again for this, as it's a separate agenda item.
Again, it's Suzanne Todd, 1065 East Moorhead Street, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28204. Okay. Thank you again for letting me present tonight. Want to just go over this rezoning. We have covered a lot of this with under the SUP. Did want to let you know a little bit about Hotel Ventures if you don't know who they are. They're a family-owned business, but successfully owning and operating hotels for the past 40 years. They've managed over 20 hotels in several states around the United States. As representative, one of their properties is actually Spring Hill Suites over on Reese Boulevard here in Huntersville. Again, the property is 10 and a handful, 10.2, 10.3 acres, located in the North Point, or the former North Point Executive Park. It is the last lot to be developed. Only approximately 2 acres of this property is developable. The rest is in floodplain and serves as a detention pond. So it's probably no surprise it's the last one to be developed. There's a lot going on right now in this business park, and it was recently purchased and it has been rebranded. So the name is now Birkdale Point. You can see, too, that the buildings have been painted. They're brick buildings. They've been kind of brought up from the 1980s, modernized and painted white. New interior lobbies, renovations, so it looks very modern and clean and fresh. And along those lines, and you can see this is one of the 3-story buildings on the site. And along those lines is what we're proposing is a 3-story hotel consistent with the lines and, you know, the cleanliness, the modern appearance that the buildings now represent. And this is the front of the proposed hotel. And this is a rendering at dusk, so the colors are a little softer. Obviously, light plays, you know, effect on it. The color palette is actually very, very similar to how the current buildings have been painted, or how the existing buildings have been painted. This is, the other one was a front view. This one, and that would be what you'd see from North Point Executive Park Drive. This is really the primary entrance, the parking lot, probably where most people would go in. Here's the site plan. Again, that property line indicates is in white, goes around that site. Again, it's a 10-acre site. And you can see the 100-foot utility line comes into about the middle of the parking lot, it's to the end. And again, acres serving that detention pond and will remain natural. The hotel itself is 200 feet from the adjacent residential property line. The parking lot is 60 feet from the adjacent property line. We've made a lot of changes to this project based on staff and community feedback. We actually had 2 community meetings for this property, one on March 6th, one on March 20th, and we got a lot of information back. Some of the changes were, obviously, we reduced the building height from 4 feet. We had originally asked for a 51-foot building to 3 stories. We've changed the location configuration of this building. It's been all over, the buildable envelope. Again, we reduced the height of the building. We did add that interior buffer to provide additional screening. Obviously, that initial screening, the 30-foot buffer, but it's in that right-of-way. It was originally part of the office park. It was served to screen the office park, and we're providing that additional buffer. Plus, you can see the perimeter parking around the parking lot, perimeter plantings. The exterior was originally almost entirely EIFS. That has changed. That is now over 90% brick to match the rest of the park, and it's being whitewashed to match Birkdale Point. The existing site plan for this property, again, it was initially rezoned to office park in 1998, 99. In 2007, this lot alone was rezoned to go from 2-story office building to a 3-story office building. So that is currently the site plan that is attached to this property. The difference between the existing plan and the proposed plan are sort of detailed there. You can see the original footprint, or what could be built there today, is the 26,000, almost 20 and some change, 2693 square feet building compared to a 24,650 square foot building that we're proposing for this hotel. The other plan had over 200 parking spaces. This one has 121 parking spaces. The other property was 110 feet, the structure to residential, and we're 200 feet. Obviously, there's more impervious area on the original because the building is larger. So it goes from 109 is what's currently allowed, down to 86,730 is what we're proposing. So there would be more pervious area here. And then again, the parking lot is actually 30 feet from the residential versus the current proposed site is 60 feet, the parking lot to residential. Cross-section kind of gives you an idea about what you're looking at. You can see the house over to the right, and you can see that buffer. The slope of this property, and there'll be minimal grading, it does slope away from the homes and slope down, so way and down. There is, on top of that, the existing buffer is kind of sitting on top of a little berm there, and we'll actually have to put a retaining wall on part of the parking lot, kind of right in front of the plantings. Is that correct? In front of the perimeter plantings? So if you see the blue car, there'll be a little retaining wall there, up to how many feet? 6? How many? 3.5? And then on top of that would be, the height of the berm. On top of that, we're actually proposing a 6-foot fence. And then behind that would be the existing buffer. And then, of course, you can see what the front buffer, the interior buffer in the parking lot is a mix of deciduous, evergreen, shrubs, and, higher, taller trees to give you that kind of mix and that full screening. And then there'll be some ornamental trees, of course, up against the building itself. And again, this property, this use is consistent with the 2040 plan. Again, the property is in mixed-use center, which encourages mixed uses, and accommodating the hotel with the office would create that mixed-use commercial subdivision, as well as being in the town core, which encourages more intensive uses. So that's the end of our presentation, if you have any questions.
All right, thank you.
Would you like
Questions for the applicant team?
Frank, you want to start?
I had the one question left over from before, is that, did you ever, in your planning and design, did you ever plan just on building the 30-foot buffer along the property line, and that's it?
On the property line, on the white property line?
On the residential property line? As required by the zoning ordinance. Zoning ordinance requires a 30-foot buffer along the residential line.
I believe that's what we initially proposed.
Sure. Hitesh Patel, Augusta, Georgia. Yes, initially in our first proposal, that's what we were hoping to keep that 30-foot, use that 30-foot buffer that's existing. However, because it was in the utility right away, at the time, staff didn't feel comfortable about whether those trees can remain indefinitely without being prune cut or removed. Of course, then, since then, we were able to get this letter from the utility company where they're at least acknowledging that 30-foot buffer exists. They're acknowledging that they have no intention of willfully cutting those trees down and clearing it, unless obviously it poses some sort of a danger to their overhead lines. And then, of course, they granted us rights to replant and granted the development within that right away at the same time. So a lot has changed since when we first started. So we left the interior, but we're going to plan on leaving that still new alternate buffer just as additional screening.
While we're on buffer, and this might be a question for Jesse, they can't plant any more in that 30-foot buffer. It seems very barren. Mostly indigenous trees are in, that you can see through, the limbs are high. They can't plant evergreens in that 30-foot buffer, can they? Shorter ones?
In my experience in Huntersville with the energy companies typically do not allow you to plant new, large maturing trees. They have in the past allowed small maturing trees and shrubs and parking.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of seeing if that would be available. Could we plant a max 10, 12-foot tall evergreen in that 30-foot buffer? Because it just seems like from the photos, it's like you can see straight through those trees just because they're all larger, high limb, lose their leaves.
Certainly asked to supplement the existing buffer with large evergreen shrubs to small evergreen trees. It depends on the approved planting list we have, what the appropriate tree would be. Ultimately, it would be at the applicant's risk, and they would need to, like they supplied today, they would need to ensure that whatever they plant is allowed, and then if it's taken down, if you guys request additional plantings, then they would need to replace those per the note on the rezoning plan.
Appreciate it. And Mr. Patel, is that something that you'd be willing to consider?
I mean, I'd have to consult with our landscape architects and so forth. But one thing to do keep in mind is we are adding some of these pictures that you guys have seen doesn't take into effect. It's basically looking at what's existing and not taking into considering every other layer that we're going to add in between those pictures and where we're going to be, including the 6-foot fence, perimeter parking, additional.
So my thought was on the perimeter fence and, to make it seem like it's still a natural backyard and somebody didn't just come build a 6-foot vinyl fence at the back of their yards, that maybe a bush or two in front of said fence would look a little nicer.
So that fence, you have the property line, you have the 30-foot buffer.
Which is very barren.
Which is barren, and then the fence will come in.
Correct.
Yes, we could probably discuss adding a few other items inside of that. utility.
Excellent.
And that would be, I mean, if, we could certainly enhance, and if the property owner could even allow, on their property, if that's something they were interested in, and that could even be done in lieu of the interior buffer, if that's not appealing. I mean, we did really try to figure out how to use that existing buffer. I do know some of it has been cleared, perhaps by property owners, perhaps not. I don't know who's been mowing it or doing, but we could certainly add, we could work with those, those 6 lots to try to enhance that.
Perfect.
If that's something the board's interested in, even as an alternative. I mean, we were trying to use that buffer.
Excellent. And you have something with the buffer or something completely different?
I had a question similar to yours at some point. To ask, in addition to what is now proposed, could the current vegetation along the property line be supplemented? I went out there and looked at the property. I didn't go up and walk right behind the residents' houses. I didn't feel like they would appreciate that. But from a distance, there were I'm not saying it was along their property line, but there were a number of evergreens, probably from that distance, looking at it, estimate they're probably 10 feet tall, maybe a little more. For a section, there are holes. And these were evergreens. Of course, there were some deciduous around also. That's why I was just interested in blocking that and, trying to do something to mitigate in favor of the residents.
And if you were to recommend supplementing landscaping and they agreed to it, staff would work with them on the appropriate materials to put in there, a mix of heights.
All right, and this is going back to the traffic, the TIA, just to get confirmation. Tell us a little bit about the hotel business. How much occupancy do you look for on a daily basis of that 132 rooms, et cetera, and why that might be less than, the...
Right. So we are now 121 rooms. We actually took the whole fourth floor off to, due to concerns and so forth. So we lost some rooms. So we're at 121. Traffic on a hotel, most guests nowadays, they commute together as well. So although we have 121 rooms, 121 parking spaces, on a full night, you will still see maybe 1/3 of the parking lot still empty. And that's because people come together, but they don't like to stay in the same room. They rent their own separate rooms. From a traffic standpoint, we don't have like rush hour, like Workwood, where everybody's coming in at the same time, or at the end of the day, leaving at the same time. That's really what causes congestion. We have folks coming in throughout the day, the hours, they check in anytime between 2 to 7, 8 o'clock. So it's spread out rather than saying the morning rush hour or the evening rush hour. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does, very much so. And I know this probably isn't your business market, so you don't know it very well, but I've heard there's a lot of office vacancy in Huntersville as well. So this is bringing a mix to the community, correct? I don't know, that might be a better answer for Jesse. There's a lot of office space available in town, not necessarily Class A, but some other office space. And that's why we're changing this type is that's not needed right now, correct?
I don't know the statistics on office vacancy. That does seem, based on developers we've worked with recently, office use is down. So in the report, we do mention that it isn't a mixed use node. It doesn't necessarily mean a mixed-use building, but a mix of uses. And a hotel does complement an office park, so it does mix those land uses, which is consistent with the 2040 plan in that general area.
Perfect.
Jesse, what's the status of the 35-foot wide vehicular bridge that's planned? When is that? The 35-foot vehicular bridge, that's to town.
Do you know, is that contingent upon some new rezonings at Birkdale?
No, I mean, it's in the plans, but it's not funded. It's not proposed to happen anytime soon that I'm aware of. We can check on that. But the pedestrian bridge is there, so.
Yeah, so, and to further that, on that vein, the request to the applicant is to carry over the note from the previous rezonings that when that is funded and when that does get built, then they foot the bill to build the road up to the bridge. We don't have a date for funding for that as of now.
Oh, just to follow up on occupancy out there in the business park, this is probably Mr. Patel. He's probably, so there's 5 office buildings out there. Any idea? I know after Rubbermaid kind of downstaffed, there was a lot of vacancies. Any idea since they've refurbished and redone how their occupancy rates are?
I'm not really sure because it's recently that they've refurbished it, and I think they're still in the process of doing some of the interior refab. So I'm not really sure how their occupancies have changed regarding that.
Okay. I assume since it's sold, it wasn't all that productive before, and it's,
But I know Rubbermaid does produce a significant amount of room nights, just because this particular building, they actually travel to exit 23, and they're one of our big clients at the Spring Hill Suites.
Okay.
I'm sure they would love to have a hotel right next to them.
So while we're on the Spring Hill Suites, do you have any knowledge of history of crime in the Spring Hill Suites? Car break-ins, anything like that you can relay?
At the time, we had one car breaking, but it wasn't just isolated to the hotel. They literally went down the apartment complex, many different places, even with the police station being right around the corner.
Right. On the veneers, so you originally came with something called EIFS. I don't even know what that is. I'm not an architect. But what are the benefits of EIFS versus brick?
EIFS has better insulation. It's the foam that goes onto the building, and then there's several layers of mesh and thin concrete that gets on there. So typically again, I'm not an architect in that sense as well, knowing about R ratings and so forth, but EIFS does help a little bit better with insulation and a little bit better with noise control.
So more environmental friendly.
Brick
Okay.
is longer lasting.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. I'm good for now.
And looking back through my notes, had a light pollution question. I haven't found the lighting plans, but I assume the lights will be focused away from the homes into the parking lot where necessary, and there won't be a lot of light pollution spilling over into the backyards.
So this is just a concept plan. We don't require a lighting plan with a concept plan, but if it was to be approved and goes into construction phase, we require it to meet zoning standards for lighting. If they, for some reason, couldn't meet the lighting standards, they would have to come back in to rezone to ask for a modification, which.
Yep. And then the same question for noise pollution. They're still under the same regulations, nothing, no loud noise after a certain hour or anything like that, just like a regular neighborhood if it got built beside it, or a event venue or something like that.
Correct.
Tenfold.
Couple questions for the applicant, if I could. The retaining wall in the northeast corner of the parking lot, what's its purpose?
Tespaloba, 121 Gilead Road, Huntersville. That's just because directly behind the parking lot, there are some underground power lines, and they kind of have the earth bermed up in that location. So we weren't able to make the grades to slope up fast enough with adequate parking lot slope. So we just have a small retaining wall to hold back that earth.
So just to cut into it.
And we've had the discussions with Energy United about the depth of those lines, and they're not very deep. I think they're about 18 to 24 inches. So we have fully, pulled our grading off of that to where we're not, not cutting in that at all.
Okay. And then the privacy fence, how it's depicted right now on the plan. It runs, I don't remember the distance, but then makes a turn, let's call it 35, 40 degrees down. Was any, and I can see why it was done, was any consideration though given to just continuing to run that straight line parallel the northern property line and at least run it to the last residential parcel, and I think it's a cul-de-sac because beyond that is HOA land. But even if you just took it even with the western corner of the rear property line, or the most western residential thing, my point, did you consider just taking it straight versus making the turn?
Yeah, so the reasoning behind that is because there's a 10-foot berm required at the top of that BMP, and there's also a platted easement. So on top of that, plus our required parking lot screening, there wasn't really going to be enough room. And we kind of were looking at that wet pond as a natural deterrent because safety and privacy and those specifics came up. So basically, you know, stopping it at that BMP where there's going to be constant water, we were looking at it as a natural deterrent.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant or even staff at this point? Yes, sir.
This is for staff, I guess. So how did we get to, or what prompted us to change the facade from, well, first, what does EFS stand for?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. It's kind of a stucco kind of look.
It's synthetic stucco is what it's commonly referred to.
Yeah,
So how
it's
does, how did
popular.
we
It's
get
a
to the
cheaper. It's a cheaper material than brick.
cheaper and more energy efficient? Got it. But-
I can't attest to any energy efficiency.
Okay. How did we get to changing that to brick?
So the existing subdivision and office park design guidelines call for brick exterior.
Okay.
So that being EVIS looks out of place in an otherwise fully brick office park. It blends in better with the
Was EFS around 20 years ago? When these codes? Who knows? Okay.
Yes,
All right.
it was, and, you know, your opinions of it are what they are, but I won't touch on that, but it's been around for a bit.
Not an expert. So now we're trying to match that business park that's been remodeled and actually the brick's been, you know, red brick's been painted white, which, you know, everybody can have their own opinion of. I've got an opinion of the quality of the paint job they did in some places where they looks like they ran out of paint, so it's less white in other places. And requiring them to actually, you know, by what means do we actually require them to really match some design that's 20 years, 25 years old now?
Really, the only thing we can put our foot on is the guidelines for the park,
Okay.
which still is in place. So, again, those call for a brick exterior for the buildings. You know, the 2040 plan and the zoning ordinance calls for, you know, having comparable design to the surrounding areas. So it just made sense for us to match the guidelines that were previously approved for anything that is incorporated now.
Okay. So they could put red brick up and still be in compliance with those?
Sure.
Okay, okay. All right, thanks.
All right, Mr. Chair, I have a motion. The planning board recommends approval of the proposed rezoning petition R24-01 North Point Hotel with condition. The planning board has considered Huntersville zoning ordinance Articles 11.4.7D and 11.47E and finds that the rezoning is consistent with the surrounding development's character. Further, given the distance of separation and proposed buffering to adjacent single-family properties, the planning board believes this plan is consistent with the spirit of the zoning ordinance. In addition, the planning board finds that the petition is consistent with Huntersville 24 Community Plan Policies LU6, LU6.1, LU6.2, and the plan's recurring theme to maintain or exceed the current percentage of tax revenue from non-residential uses. The planning board also recommends, 1, approval of the applicant's requested modification to replace the required 30-foot buffer along the residential property line with an alternative buffer built within the parking lot. 2, approval of the applicant's requested modification to allow a portion of the proposed parking lot to be outside of the proposed alternative buffer. 3, that the applicant work with staff to supplement the vegetation in the 30-foot buffer along the residential property lines. This recommendation for approval is contingent upon the applicant making required improvements to North Point Executive Drive prior to gaining a certificate of occupancy to allow acceptance of the street as a public right-of-way. That the developers of the business park, as addressed and approved rezoning R98-10 and R07-17, dedicate and construct a 35-foot right-of-way connector to the Tally Road, Burkdale Village vehicular bridge once the location of that bridge is determined. The applicant submits to staff the 2 May 24 a letter from Energy United approving the proposed development with stipulations. Approval of the approval of the SUP 24-01 North Point Hotel by the town board, and other minor staff comments remaining are addressed. It is reasonable in the public interest to approve the rezoning plan because the rezoning is consistent with the envisioned use and development patterns set forth in the 2040 community plan. The end.
We have a motion. Does anyone have a second?
I'm going to second it, just to get into discussion.
Thank you. Discussion, Mr. Gammon?
I think it's been discussed to death, but that's my motion.
I mean, I think it could be done nicely. I mean, is it ideal to have a hotel in your backyard? No. But there's other places in Huntersville that I could point to on a map where there's commercial 70 feet from a neighborhood. They put the right vegetation there. It seems to work. I personally think hotel is lower traffic. In seeing some of the hotel parking lots that I drive by and stay in for work, I mean, like he said, it's 50 cars a day in and out. So I don't think it adds that much traffic. I think if the design is done the right way, with the light and, it matches the aesthetic of the other buildings, you guys get a fence, the residents get a fence with some landscaping nice. Yeah, it's gonna close in your backyards a little bit. If you look up, you might be able to see part of a building, but I mean, I feel like that's not uncommon in Huntersville. Do you guys want to have a clean, nice pasture behind your house? Sure, I think everybody would, but also we've got some, developers' rights to consider. So that's kind of where I am. I'm on the fence, but if it doesn't reduce property values, if they can bring that evidence to the table, I don't think there's any reason that it shouldn't be rezoned.
This was tough for me. That, again, I've made this comment before, we have limited real estate left in Huntersville to develop. We need to be cautious about how we do that. Just given this location, if I momentarily take out the residential, I just give this location proximity to Birkdale, proximity to 77, proximity to the office park, all that makes it an easier decision to say, yes, this is a great land use. This makes sense for a hotel. Where I hit pause is when I do look at the proximity to the existing residential. And I also look at the residential that they had when they purchased that real estate, whether they did or did not, they research and realize, okay, that is zoned for an office building. I'm comfortable with an office building. If we rezone this, it's not an office building anymore. It's a hotel. That's where I have a hard time reconciling it with myself of whether or not this is the right decision if we recommend to approve it. And that's where we have to go back and look at the 2040 plan and other land use. So tough decision for me. Those are just how I'm sitting here weighing this.
Any other discussion?
I'll key off what Scott said a little bit, I guess. So, yeah, it's tough. I mean, I've got friends in your neighborhood, and I've listened to them as well. I've been to the site and looked at it, and yes, there is a clear sight line at the rear of the property in some of these houses. I think they can fix that with the buffering and the extra buffering we've added to it. As far as the change from office to hotel, the business park as it is not fully occupied. I think it's really, not viable. I've been through there during the weekday. There's sparse cars in the parking lot. I don't think it's occupied too much. And for us to say, no, the land use has to be an office building is actually devaluing that land because who else is going to come through here with anything else? Apartments will certainly get knocked down, or anything soft industrial would. So and I know the argument is all, well, it could be worse, and I know that's a sorry argument to do, to put up there, but that's kind of I'm at the same decision point as you, or who are we? It's taking sides, I guess, at some point. Are we the landowner that's struggling and can't really make another office building viable there, or to give it a chance and move it on to something? And I've visited the hotel in the business park, their hotel. It's very nice. It's a nice amenity. I had same questions when it was going up, right on the creek over there with the deer and all that kind of stuff. But it turned out pretty nice. So, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts.
One last comment. I would say that property has sat there empty for 25 years, and nobody's come to offer to build another office building there. And with the way office buildings are empty now, I don't think anybody is. So, question is, yeah, let it stay empty another 25 years, or draw taxes off of it and put something that can be useful.
Along those same lines, I'm a big private property rights proponent. And just as if you own a residential house, you have private property rights, I also have to look at it from whoever the ownership of this 10 acres is. They also have rights. And right now, their rights is limited to a hotel. But again, if we're part of our job, that's why we're here. That's why the town is here, because there are instances where properties do need to be rezoned. So it's not lost on me either that there's somebody that owns this piece of real estate and would like to develop it. So just additional comment.
Okay, any other discussion? No? All right, let's take a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. Rezoning carries unanimously, 6-0. For folks in the audience, we have one other thing to do. It's just some other business and honoring Frank or whatever. What I will do is, let's just take like a 3-4 minute break. If you guys want to wrap up, I don't want to keep you here any longer than we already have. I do want to say thank you for bringing your passion and your collectiveness to us. That is always important, regardless of whether you're for or against whatever we are discussing. So thank you all for being here. And I didn't get to say it beforehand. I understand why he had to leave. If anyone knows the family with the young man that was sitting in the second row there, if someone knows him, be sure to, okay. Tell him I said thank you for coming here and being a part of that tonight. That's very important to me. I love seeing
I think since everybody here, before you do a short recess, is that we've said this up here on this board many times, that the SUP discussion, we'd always agree, but we agree to disagree. And we say that if we all agreed all the time, we'd only need one person here. So that's why there's 9 of us assigned to go through and do this.
Yeah.
When we do the recess, ma'am, you can come up and ask us a question.
At the recess,
No.
it's just
Let me put us, as a point of order, let me put us into a 5-minute recess so everyone can leave, because we have other stuff that we have to get to on the agenda. We'll take a 5-minute recess, so everyone
But you're
that
welcome
was
to
here.
approach us, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go into a 5-minute recess if we could, and then we'll call it back to do attending, we would ask that you wrap up your conversations, and we shall get going.
I make a motion that Jay Henson return to the board.
Second.
Second that. All right, all those in favor of bringing him back? Any opposed? None? Jay, join us.
Yeah, Jay's like, send me home.
Revote, all right. Okay. Yes, sir. All right, so other business tonight. Other business consists of a couple things. First off, Jay and Scott, you've been reappointed. Congratulations. So congratulations to that. I hope you're not second guessing that opportunity. Also.
Same salary?
Yes. Goose egg. I believe he was here earlier. Understandable that he's not now. I'd also like to acknowledge Michael Pollard, who was the third appointee, and he will be joining us from the HOAB board and beginning next month. One side note acknowledgement before we get to the big one. Jody, I saw, and this was a while ago because we didn't have a meeting last month, but your business was recognized as the Huntersville Business of the Year.
Oh, wow. Nice. Did not know that.
So,
They just want to eat the desserts.
congratulations to you. But you are now going to be overshadowed. Frank Gammon, it's your last night. Whether you and I agree with term limits or not, you, sir, are termed out and done. For
Well, this
you-
meeting's never going to end.
No, it's not. So for you, a couple things to honor your service, and I will share a few words as well. But if you would.
That's very nice, guys.
So please accept that as
Thank
a
you.
token of appreciation for your service to the town. Just a couple words.
You buy me cheap, but that's okay.
I met you, gosh, it was probably back 2017. I don't even think you were appointed to a board yet, and I was barely on the HOAB, and we realized that we were just two local government junkies sitting in the back of their budget retreat one January, and that's where we met each other. And we've been at it ever since. And the thing where you far outpaced me is the amount of hours in totality that you have given to this town, just of your own volition, your own willingness. Because not only have you served here for 6 years, but then, like you said, you also did 4.5 years roughly as the liaison for the HOAB. Used to sit in on those before that because I would see you. And then you would also, and do attend the town board meetings, the budget retreats. You are basically all over and thoroughly woven into the fabric of this community. And to be able to sit up here with you and these last 2 years, to partner with you, to run this board and just do our best to provide guidance to the commissioners so they can make their best decisions possible and do what they were elected to do, has been an absolute honor. And honestly, the fact that you're even here versus showing up 2 nights a week on a different night is a shame, because I don't think there's anyone more devoted to this town than you. So if you have to be done on this one, then I strongly encourage you to keep going forward in making a difference. I know you'll be out there for our meetings and you'll still be at the town board meetings. But I hope you take it further than that, because this town needs one of you, honestly needs 6 of you with your integrity and commitment. So
we can take 6, though.
that's fair. 4, how about 4? But that's what I have to say, and thank you, sir.
Thank you. And thank Tracy. Hey, served with a lot of different people up here for 6 years. Every one of, well, maybe there's that one. Very professional people and put a lot of time in here. But I will say this, that I think, nothing against anybody prior, the 4 previous years, I think that this board in the last 2 years has matured. And I want it to continue to mature. And I encourage you to ensure that politics do not get involved in this board. You can have all the political opinions you want, you can go lobby all you want, and outside that door, or down at 760, you can get up on the table and advocate for whatever you want. But when you get in here, don't bring it with you. You know, when I don't want to say, I'm not going to say anything negative about it, but I'll just say, the first night I was on this board, I had somebody sitting on this board complaining about the town board, and they weren't going to, well, it doesn't matter what we do, they're going to deny it anyway. And I don't think I let them get away with it. But that's how much this board has matured over the last 4 years, and it needs to stay that way. I want to tell you that you're getting an excellent guy, Michael Pollard, to come my replacement. He's got a lot of government experience. I think he's an IT guy in his life, but he's worked for a mayor in a major city. He's worked for a governor in another state. He's a very competent individual. And I highly recommended that he be one of my choices that I would have picked from the list they had. So I think he will do an excellent job, so welcome him. And I guarantee you, he won't be political either. I don't see it in him. Not in here, anyway. And I appreciate all the hard work everybody does, and do your due diligence, and Scott, step it up. And the staff, I mean, Brad Boomerang back in here, you know, he used to stand up there, he was the Jesse, he'd be standing up there and we'd be beating on him. Now he's back as the deputy. I talked to Brian today, he gave me a call since he couldn't be here tonight. I see Jack every Thursday at Rotary. And Jacob, thank you for everything you've done for the board. And like I said, we don't always agree, but to my knowledge, we've never been angry at each other. And nobody's carried any grudges outside that door when we left here. The decision's made, you argue your point, and when it's over, it's over. Now, you might go home and break a glass or something, but you don't let anybody know what's going on. So I thank you, and I thank the town for the opportunity to be able to do this. You don't know how shocked I was when they put me back in for a second term. So, thank you, guys. I'll miss you. I'll miss being involved with this. And I'll tell you what, though, I do need a break. I spent all day going through this stuff. So next time, I'm not going to go through all day. I'll drink a beer, or an adult beverage, excuse me. Little children listening out there at midnight. An adult beverage, and come over and listen to you guys talk.
We'll see you in there.
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say thank you for, the leadership and the mentorship. I don't think this board will, be able to equal what you spend in due diligence and time and research. We'll try our best, but I just want to thank you for your service. The first time I met you, you came to a Greenway Trails and Bike Commission, and I was like, who is this guy with all this knowledge just coming in here out of nowhere? You go and find the information and present it, and it's very helpful, and thank you for everything you've taught me for the last, I guess we've been together 4 years now, and I greatly appreciate it, and I will be reaching out for advice.
We were on the Greenway Commission for a short time together.
Yeah, a couple months, yeah. So, I appreciate everything you do for this town. Appreciate it.
Frank, I'd echo, obviously, everything they've said. I think I know you've made me a better board member, and I appreciate it. You've set the bar very high. As he said, we all have a challenge ahead of ourselves because the due diligence that Frank brings that benefits all of us, we're going to miss it. So I think we all need to make sure that we try to, we won't fill the void, but at least try to fill some of it. But yeah, Frankie, and you, I can't think of anybody that's put more time and effort and more passionate about Huntersville than you. And as Jeff said, I hope you don't go away. I hope you stay involved and keep us on our toes and keep challenging us and everybody else. So we appreciate your service.
Yeah, Frank, echoing that again, it's been a pleasure working with you, for sure. I think we met on the Ordinance Advisory Board. I think we were talking about something, and you kept describing your neighborhood, and I'm like, that sounds kind of familiar. Find out, a stone's throw, the next street over, so we pass each other sometimes in and out, and I appreciate, talking about things with you. I did get a chuckle when you said, we need 6 or 4 Franks on the board. Can you imagine those questions and that motion?
How long the meeting will be? Oh.
And you left your mark, Frank, and a very good one.
And I just want to say thank you so much for your outstanding service to the town of Huntersville and the planning board. Your knowledge you were so great to me. Like when I first started, you and Dan showed up and were like, it's not so bad. You just have to start talking. I still haven't done very good at that eventually. But you were very motivating to, get behind me. And when I had questions, I know you could have answered the question, but you were really good about saying this is where you'll find the answer to the question, which is really helpful. And I just want to thank you. And I hope you do lots and lots of things here and we see you all over town. It'd be awesome.
And I'll keep echoing the thanks and praise for all you've done, all your due diligence, and I'll still call you if I need advice, so you can keep doing that due diligence, and we can trade those ideas the afternoon before the board meeting would be nice, but.
I'd be surprised now, see, now I can give a Huntersville Planning Board blast out to all of you.
That'd be perfect.
But you can't answer that way. You gotta answer that.
Individually, got it, yeah.
I'm not on the board, so I can blast it out. Say, hey, my heads.
Really appreciate all you do. Hope you stay involved in government, hint, hint, and look forward to working with you some more.
You don't need anybody telling you what to do. But if you want to ask a question, I'll do the best I can. So please, what we were talking earlier today, I may always talk about having a kiosk outside town hall selling pitchforks and torches. I may have one outside the town hall advisory board selling motions.
You are the motion man. How many have you done? 100 motions?
He stopped counting.
I stopped counting. Frank, you can come back and speak, but you're going to be limited to 3 minutes, just so you know.
No, you don't understand. I'll bring people with me.
That's probably true.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right,
And
folks.
I get the last motion?
Yes, absolutely.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor of adjourning? Any opposed? Gavel that.
Substitute motion.